Hopefully. Oh, it's like.
No, that was not me.
I might as well wait for Patrick.
Imagine if you were here.
She's probably parking like,
Back on the street.
Leslie
Do we
next
have
to
a, do we have a sign? Do we have a sign?
Real. No, no.
There are a lot of people trickling in though, both online and in the room.
Yeah. My mind on. Sorry. Oh, is that?
For the notary? Ah, you made it. Oh, I'm- hang on, I'm not muted. I'm gonna start recording Joel so that I don't miss the start because I got somebody at the window.
Okay. You're oriented the usual way.
No.
Rotate it around so the folks can hear. This is a hybrid meeting, so we've got, 14 people attending by Zoom, as well as the ones who are in this room. And for those people to hear what's said here, it's happy in the microphone. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover their thing. So we got extra microphones here, there's more. So that we're not constrained to have anybody with the same kind of, anybody wants to, use this mic. But I'd like to be able to have a list of individual discussion, so if we have a couple of mics that we can sort of pass around, somebody wants to say something, we should one of them. So before we begin, I just some of you, I know some people they don't know, and not you don't know that they want to see us around the table here either. So I'm still beginning.
Pat Woodward.
And also with us this evening, Warren Cross, from here, who was the principal in the report, which is the recommendation, which is well positioned. That raises the question of whether okay. So I think maybe just sort of a quick recap, how this has unfolded. And don't hold me to the timeline exactly because I didn't actually write it down. But there have been concerns about noise expressed over the years. At least two efforts in my memory were actually looking at the possibility of doing some sort of law, both of which got shelved previous efforts. I think maybe as much as 3 years ago now, there's another group of people, neighbors who got together and started talking about the need for doing something. And when I appointed Timothy Wolf to to chair a committee based on her willingness to do it. That committee met multiple times. They submitted what I regard as an excellent report, which the town board received and reviewed. And based on the recommendations in the report, we asked that group if they would come up with a suggested local law, which they did. That local law, which we never proposed formally, but we floated, garnered a lot of criticism as well as positive feedback. And based on that feedback, there was, several of the comments were really excellent, including those from Warren Cross. And Warren, because he has considerable expertise, was asked by the board if he could sort of take a step back, larger picture view of what other communities are doing and have done out noise, what works, what doesn't work, and then to come, basically report back with his findings and with some recommendations on how to proceed. So that was supposed to happen in January, took a little bit longer, put them in December. We never thought it was a good time to do it. So in maybe February, Warren came back with having distilled his efforts, came back with a model law, which he thought would serve as a good basis for us to consider. That's what has been floated, and that is that upon which people have been commenting. So that's where we are today. You'd like to add to that, Warren? Using a microphone. Think it might be anyway.
I can, when we first did it. Yes, but what do I have to add to that? I don't have a lot to add to that, just that we tweaked a few things in the initial law, and the focus changed from trying to make it clear that this will affect a very, very small percentage of the population, and that this is really targeted at mostly egregious, seemingly unsolvable situations. And for the vast majority of residents, we'll never have to deal with this. And even in my comments that are posted on the website, I make some comments. One of the terms I use is sonic assault. And the reason why I use such pointed language that might make you wince, it's supposed to make you wince, because the idea is that there's what people do in their daily life and their pursuits of family tradition, everything they want to do is over here. And what we're talking about is egregious, just being a really bad neighbor, in a way that has really very little to do with what's going to happen in daily life. And that none of us are particularly interested in curtailing all the normal things that you would imagine that you would do, and parties and things and all the things that you're really going to do. This is really in relief to a couple of situations that have happened in the past few years, where it has essentially driven people from their homes and inspired them to sell their houses or be in such a hopeless situation that there was no way out. And so this really is to make a very strong point. This is not, targeted at daily life. This really is the most egregious situation that really don't have any other solution.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Okay, yeah. With Warren,
Yeah, at that point, whoever
again, at the microphone.
I don't think I need Mike. I think
It's not that we can't stop it.
Family lifestyle is a big thing.
It's not that you can't hear you. I'm sure you can be heard. It's that-
I don't know everybody in here.
No,
Yeah, it's not you. It's not us.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
Come here.
Here's the daily lifestyles and everything like that. There's a lot of people in the community, a lot of farmers, a lot of us lived here 60+ years. And, you know, new people come in and we're sitting here, the older ones. There's gonna come points in times where we may be out till 9:30 at night baling hay. The farm equipment makes noise, okay? And along that aspect, you have hunters, you know, they're out. Legal hunting season, daylight till sundown. You have a lot of anti-hunters in the neighborhood. How's this gonna affect us and our way of life? And the time frames and all that? That's my question. Now, are you gonna set them time frames? Or decide what the noise level is? That's my question.
The timeframes are still up for debate. That's part of the public commentary. Those have not been set in stone at all. And that's part of into the information. The only people regulating firearms is really the DEC. In that, you know, you can't shoot within 500 feet of another residence. That's the DEC since the 70s. That's not me. It has nothing to do with noise law. And I doubt you would be shooting in the dark at night. Yeah, but I know nobody's out there with an SPL meter. So one of the things I want to clear up is a number of things has to happen. Somebody has to be generating a significant amount of noise. Somebody has to be affected by it. And that person who's affected by it has to be calling law enforcement. Law enforcement comes on the scene. They're the third person in the chain who gets to decide whether or not this rises to the level of action or a public official. The law itself doesn't know that any of this exists, right? So there's humans involved here. There'll be an activity, there'll be somebody that might be affected by this. And they have the opportunity to say something about it or not. And if there's any communication going on between the two parties, you can probably head this off well before. The law is for those situations where this breaks down. There are
1%, 0.5%, 1/4% of everything we all do here. We don't have half of a percent is coming here. Trying to tell all those people how we grew up, what we've done, farmer, right, everybody here, hunters, everybody what they can do. You know what, you come into this community, 90% of the people in this room right here grew up here. And we're here because of families, this and that. And I am so tired of people coming in here. What you do on your property is your responsibility. And I. This man worked hard as like, you know, farms, you know, this, you know, that, sometimes you gotta. Because we can't do it all. And it bothers me that he said you can come in here. And 1/4% of the people in the population here and try to change this. Where do you live? Where? Yeah.
I've been a resident I've been here since 97, my wife since 82.
Well, I've been here since 72. You know, if we don't like the road you came in on, it's the same damn road you leave. You understand? I mean, how many times you guys happen here? Not as the same as they have. People here are against it. These are hard-working people, we work different hours, we can't fit everything. Your convenience, your 8 hour a day.
But again, the timeframes have not been set.
There should be no time frame, it's what it is.
This is a right to farm community. And so there are rights that you have in that pursuit. Again, this is to head off a number of situations we've had in the last couple of years where industries have moved in to rural residential areas and caused
What industry?
hell.
Yes. What industry do we have here moved in because you guys won't let them come in here?
I'd like other people to have the opportunity to speak as well.
Please talk. Please talk.
I'd like people from, there are a lot of people here, I want to have an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for holding this meeting. I think it's really important that everybody has a chance to talk to each other here because a lot happens here and there, things aren't connected. So thank you, everybody, for being here. It's really important that we have these discussions together. And I just, just since we've been here, what's the person's name that's introducing this law? Warren. Warren?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just jotted down a couple of notes that, you mentioned that this law is gonna affect a small minority of people, targeted at specific instances of what you call, I think, auditory assault. You mentioned it's only a couple of situations in the past few years. It's not targeted, or it's targeted at the most egregious situations. Okay, you mentioned that. But in the law that, was proposed, I read over it, I just pulled out some examples. And as far as I can tell, these examples would be defined as unreasonable noise. I'm going to read them. Any prolonged sound that is unnecessary. Any prolonged sound that is excessive. Any prolonged sound that is unnatural. Any sound which annoys a reasonable person of normal sensitivities under the circumstances. Also, any sound which interferes with the repose of a reasonable person of normal sensitivities under the circumstances. I'm very concerned that we're casting an incredibly wide net, and I know there may be some instances that are very problematic that maybe, should be put in a situation where the police have to show up and deal with it. Also, I'm not someone that thinks all police should be abolished. But I also think it's important not to just create more laws that are going to force police to come knocking on our neighbor's doors. Because every week we see terrible situations that happen. We've had them here in Danby. I don't want to create more situations where we're forcing one neighbor to call the police on another neighbor. There has to be another way to deal with some of this stuff. I'll let other people speak. Also, it'd be great if we had some kind of system for people to speak so that there's a lot of people here that want something to say. And I'm afraid that if someone's a little shy, we're not going to have a chance to talk to them. So, thank you for listening.
Just to respond to,
Can I interrupt for 1 second as the recording secretary? If you need me to get the board, I'm asking you, if you need me to get people's names, I have not been able to get a single name of anybody who has spoken.
We did pass a sheet for people who.
Okay, but if you want me to associate,
People speak, they could have speaking though. So I think if you're willing to identify yourself when you come in, because. I would speak feelings.
yeah.
Hello?
Just to respond to that, this public comment period is exactly the time that we get to hone and craft what this is. This law is based on existing law that across hundreds of communities. And this is a sample. I didn't draft this law as much as I have curated what it is. And so to make it ours, the entire point of the public comment period is to shape it, to have input on it, and to figure out how to make it ours. It's hasn't been even voted on yet.
I would like to talk and maybe you could find out. My name is Elizabeth Dash. I've lived here my whole life. I'm 63 years old, so that's a long time. I'm not really for it or against it, but I sure would like to know what a neighbor is supposed to do when they're living peacefully in their house, they never cause any trouble, and then all of a sudden you live with something like this. And this is only 20 seconds long, but I mean, it's. There's an ordinance, doing an ordinance, some of the words are. And
No, it's a little bit arbitrary.
also, when they're doing that, they're not easy to talk with, and the fumes come in our house, and we just, you know, we're quiet neighbors, we just want peace, and I don't want to have any issues with anybody. I love farmers and I understand hunters, but when you get guys like that, when you're just trying to relax, it's a little much. So that's really.
But I like to.
Yeah, so that's my story, and
Yeah.
I'd
I'd like to do it,
All of it.
recognizing one person at a time. And people put their hands up, so everybody will get a chance who wants to contribute to the conversation. But I don't, but we shouldn't have to just jump in, because otherwise it's totally out of control. Let's start.
it's 1, 2. Lady in front.
We're gonna do it in order.
And I can say one thing before, I got something else to say. But if I could have the ordinance that you do, just open up the mic to the people that are all zoomed in, so they can join in the discussion. Go ahead, hold on, what is that? Open it up.
And let's be fair and kind to each other, please.
Okay,
I guess I understand.
But they can speak, but we can start here with people here that are speaking first. And then background noise is done, like you said.
Okay, my name is Ted Lascano. I live on Gunderman Road. I've lived in Thompson County over 60 years. I've lived in Danby over 20 years. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer. I spent 35 years going to complaints, investigating, issuing tickets, and going to court, spending time at trials. So I've got a pretty big background, certified radar operator. So I know how New York works. In New York, there's a New York penal law section called disorderly conduct, which is we call discon, that makes it illegal, quote, makes an unreasonable noise, unquote. That is already against the law in New York. State law is already challenged and it's embedded at the highest level in New York State. So if you charge someone with the New York discon law, you don't have to prove anything because it's already been accepted all the way up to the top. It's enforceable by all police agencies. And it's already based on a community standard. What you have when you say it's illegal to make an unreasonable noise is an elected judge who serves at the will of the people decides if that specific situation is reasonable or not. So a judge can say, yes, that was unreasonable, or you can say, yes, that is reasonable. Fire company fighting a fire at 3 a.m., the judge would say that's reasonable. Having a rock band at 3 a.m., the judge could say that's unreasonable. So these are already accounted for in state law. All factors, time, location, endurance, and circumstance are factors that a judge would make to determine if it's reasonable or not unreasonable. So in my opinion, everything you're discussing is already in place. A Danby noise law is untested. It may not survive judicial review. It could be struck down at any level in the court process. It may not be enforced by all police agencies. You folks may not know this, but the last I knew, the New York State Police will not enforce local ordinances, only state law. So I know I'm also volunteer fireman, and the majority of cases, it's the state police that respond. If state police are on, respond to a noise complaint, they totally ignore the Danby law, and they'll go back to the New York discon law because that's what the state police enforce. Sections like any excessive or unusually loud noise add no more specificity to the existing state discon law and is redundant. Terms like it uses unreasonable multiple times, I believe 7 times in the law, and it's simply making unlawful that which is already unlawful at state law at discon. So it begs the question, why pass a law to make illegal what is already illegal? The longer, more complicated a law is, the more likely it is to fail a legal challenge. The more you put stuff in, the more a lawyer can say that that's not reasonable. This kind of brief and to the point. Section 2.2 in this law includes things like volume of noise, intensity of noise, time duration, proximity of noise. For all of these, they have to be measured. Who measures them and how they're going to do this? Are they going to have a device? Is that device been calibrated? Has it proved its accuracy? Who's keeping the records? Who's training the person to run that device? All of these have to be established to the satisfaction of a review court. Since I was a certified radar operator, I don't have to prove anything. All I have to do is show my radar card. I pass a course that New York approved. That's the end of it. You have noise law and using any kind of measuring device, even a tape measure, that all has to be established every time that goes to trial because there's no judicial notice in New York. Section 2.3 regarding firearms states, well, Section 2.3, which includes firearms, states information that's already regulated by the state of New York. I already mentioned that New York State is very specific on the regulation of firearms. And unlike most states, the state of New York prohibits silencers on firearms. Most states you can pay a tax and get a silencer. So in effect, the state of New York, which has the right to regulate firearms, has already made it clear you may not increase the noise of a firearm. The state of New York wants that noise to be there. So in effect, the Danby Town law, noise law effectively tries to supersede New York state law by making firearms less noiseful when in fact state law requires them to make noise. And Danby law cannot supersede New York law. And the last point I want to make is Article 3, the exceptions. The Danby noise law makes a lot of exceptions and actually allows reasonable noise. And in my opinion, that removes discretion from the elected judge, because if under discount, it simply says you cannot make an unreasonable noise, the judge gets to make that call. The judge is elected by the people and answers to them. When you put exceptions in your noise law, the judge no longer has discretion. So something may come to the judge feels that should be illegal, but the noise law exempts it, the judge's hands are tied. Since Danby law cannot supersede the New York State disorderly conduct law, you're going to face the unpleasant situation where you can put an exception in your noise law, local ordinance, and a trooper may decide that the state law disorderly conduct is still a violation. So you're putting in an exception that's not legally acceptable, and you're trying to supersede state law by doing that. That's going to cause a problem. In the last item in that section, the Danby noise law might actually confuse a person into thinking this is lawful. I can make this noise because it's stated in the Danby ordinance that this is an exception, and a trooper or deputy can show up and simply look at New York State disorderly conduct that does not include the exceptions in the Danby noise law, and then issue a summons for violating the New York disorderly conduct statute, even though the Danby noise law says that it's okay to make that noise. So in effect, it's trying to take power away from the state of New York, which of course the local ordinance can't do. And it might make someone more liable if there's someone being less. And that's my conclusion.
You're citing a law, you're not citing the same law that they're talking.
I was referring to New York State disorderly conduct.
No, I mean, the noise law that you're citing is the old law.
No, that's what I found on the website, so. if
That's
I
the old one.
In an area, I apologize.
Yeah. They're both related. Yeah, so the new one has addressed all of those, so a lot of the concerns, a lot of the concerns that you have were addressed in my version. That's some of my wrinkles, eyebrows, that's the old one.
Well, again, I guess my basic question was, what is the reason for passing a new law when the existing law is already in place and it's withstood judicial review all the way up to the New York Court of Appeals?
Right.
Why are you making a new law? In other words, if the speed limit is 45, why are you going to pass a law that says the speed limit is 45? The law is already in place. What is the purpose of the new law? It's going to complicate things, mean certain agencies won't enforce it, and it can confuse people as to what's legal and what's not legal. I'm not seeing the reason for this.
So if I could interject, the law you were, the penal law 40, like disorderly conduct, refers primarily to conduct in a public space.
So that would be in the street, that would be in a public building. It would not apply to conduct that occurs on private property.
Well, I have to disagree. If the sound leaves the private area, it then falls into the public arena. In other words, if you make a sound in your soundproof room in your property, it's not heard off your property. But if that sound can be heard off of the property which it's made, it then enters the public domain. That's the same thing as exposure to the person. If you're in your house naked, it's not a violation. If you're on your front lawn naked, where you can be seen from the public street, you are in violation of exposure of a person under New York penal law, even though you're on your own private property. Anytime something can be observed by any of the five senses off of the property, in other words, light or sound travels off of the private property onto someone else's adjoining property or adjacent public property, it's no longer considered public or private property at that point because it's left your property and gone somewhere else. That's why you can't mow your lawn naked, because you can be seen by your neighbor or something on the street. You can't say, well, I'm on my own property, I don't have to wear clothes. You can say, well, anybody driving down the street can see you, that's you have to put clothes on. So you do lose that right once the sound leaves your land on someone else's land. And I bring tickets to this.
This is an important point. Because the point of, early on in the process, one of the drivers to consider the local law at all is the conclusion that there's no good law already in place that would address the issue.
I'll simply read it. I have it right here. Section 240.20, disorderly conduct of the New York penal law. A person is guilty of disorderly conduct when, with intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk thereof, and it lists several things. One of them is two, he makes unreasonable noise. He didn't even mention the word public, by the way, in that definition. It's that simple. That's why it's such a good law, because it's small, it's brief, and it puts the discretion in the judge whether it's reasonable or unreasonable. You don't have to have a long laundry list of, well, you can do this, but you can't do that, but you can do this at this time, you can't do that at that time, on and on and on and on and on, which a defense attorney would love. It just flat out says, he makes unreasonable noise. And that's where the judge can say, you can't have a rock band at 3 a.m. making blaring noise in a quiet neighborhood, but if you want to have a backyard barbecue at noon on a Saturday and make some noise, I'm fine with that. Just make sure it quiets down at 3 or 4 or whatever. But because the judge is elected, people can talk to the judge, and the judge gets the mood of the community, and the judge is the person who's elected by the people to decide what's reasonable and what's not. And if the judge hears a lot of complaints, and the judge can say, well, I guess that is unreasonable. Everybody's complaining about it. And you say, no, you can't. Well, the judge can say, in my experience, that's perfectly reasonable, and the people elected me, and I'm representing their opinions.
So what's the process for, if somebody has an issue, how do they pursue redress using this section of penal law?
It's essentially twofold. Number one, if the noise is continuous, you call a law enforcement agency. The law enforcement agency shows up. The first thing police officer does when he responds to the call is he listens for himself. He'll park the car, he goes to the same spot that the complainant is complaining from, and he listens. And if the police officer also believes it's unreasonable, then he approaches the person making the sound, says, we've got a complaint. Typically, they give him one warning. They say, turn the noise down, and I don't want to give you more complaints. If the person is in compliance, fantastic, because the issue is solved. The complainant no longer has a problem. You don't have to burden the court with the stuff. If the officer leaves and the noise comes back up, then the person gets a summons. And if the person doesn't put the noise, well, let's say the person calls the police and then lowers the noise till the officer shows up. Well, again, the noise will stop. But the second point, what I'm saying is, if you get independent witnesses, that makes a big difference. So let's say you're tired with the noise. You called several times, noise goes down as the cop car drives up the road. That does happen. You hear that noise, you call 2 or 3 neighbors and you ask them to come over. So the neighbors come over, they listen to the noise. Now, when the police officer shows up, the The person making the sound sees the cop car down the road, turns it down, the officer shows up, the officer says, well, I'm not hearing it. Then the complainant says, well, here are 3 neighbors, I want you to listen to them. All 3 neighbors say, yes, we thought it was unreasonable, we thought it was unreasonable, we thought it was unreasonable. The officer, what they typically do is, if it's a violation that they did not personally witness, they normally will not charge the person, but what they do is they will drop an accusatory instrument and they tell the complainant, you sign this accusatory instrument because you're the one that has direct knowledge. I don't have direct knowledge, I didn't hear a thing when I showed up. But if you want this to go to trial or you want to go to court, you sign accusatory. So then the person making the complaint signs it. The officer will get a written statement from the 3 witnesses, all stating we thought it was unreasonable. The person's given an appearance ticket, he goes before the judge. The evidence is presented. If he pleads not guilty, typically there's a trial. The initial complainant is there and says, I thought it was unreasonable. You've got 3 more neighbors. Yeah, we heard it too. We were there. We all think it's unreasonable. So now the judge has 4 separate citizens all saying we thought it was unreasonable at the time, and then the judge can take it from there. That's how it's normally handled. What's that?
Yeah, I have, particular interviews that I've had with sheriff who said without a noise law, there's not a whole lot that can do.
And let me give you a little background. I think it was a decade ago, the same issue came up. There was a town hall meeting, Sheriff Meskel was in attendance. It started out similar to this. I spoke at that meeting 10 years ago, and I mentioned the whole thing. And everybody looked at Sheriff Meskel and said, well, we thought you said that there was no law. And Sheriff Meskel pointed to me and said, well, what this man has just said is totally correct. There is section disorderly conduct in the New York State penal law, and that's my deputies can enforce it. And people looked at Sheriff Meskel at the time and said, well, then why are we here? And the sheriff really didn't have a good thing to say, and that's why the attempt 10 years ago to bring an ordinance died in its slow death there, because people thought that there was nothing, and when I pointed out there was, Sheriff Meskel agreed with me, and then that was the end of it, because there has been recourse in the state. I joined law enforcement in 1985, and when I started as an officer in 1985, disorderly conduct was a statute. So if people are not aware of that statute, what needs to be done is there needs to be education, but you don't need to form another law, which in my opinion is inferior to the different state law.
Joel? We have a couple of people online that are from not in the country right now. They're on European time, and they're hoping to say something before it gets too late where they are.
Okay, who are they, which ones?
Jason Horvath. Your mic also is not working, I must say.
My microphone isn't working?
Nope.
I can't get my closer than this.
And I-
Who they are, so that you can help us get identified when we speak.
Is this Jason Horvath and Paul Micro?
Jason Horvath, I'm gonna ask him to unmute.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Wonderful. Sorry, it's getting late here. We just wanted to say a little something. I'm here with my mother. We've been Danby residents, I mean, my whole life. And the one thing I would like to say is, what happened to being neighborly? Like, it seems like everyone's at each other's throat. And I know if we're being a little noisy after 9 and you're my neighbor, come on over, have a drink, enjoy the bonfire, you know? We've never had conflicts like this, and we know our neighbors, we love our neighbors. And if you are having a dispute with your neighbor over sound, that seems very personal and not community-based. I mean, we know our community and we respect our community, and we've all lived here for a very long time. And I know if it's my birthday and we want to set off some fireworks at 10:01, I know my neighbors across the street, down the road are going to appreciate that. And we're going to be kind about it, and we're going to be respectful to each other. We're not going to go out of our way to call the police without real reason to send an armed officer to somebody's home that we call our neighbor.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Paul, did you
Of
want to-
course.
Unmute yourself, or Janet, you have to unmute him.
You want to say anything? All right, that's our part. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Who are you asking to unmute, Joel?
Paul? Got a hand up?
Coming online,
I am.
just about, yep.
Yes. Go ahead.
You're on.
Hi. Hi. My name is Paul Macaron, and my wife and I have lived in Danby for the last 17 years. I've written a statement that I'd like to read now regarding this issue. I think that Danby is perhaps the quietest place I have ever lived, and that any attempt to characterize this town as noisy is just not realistic and borders on the ridiculous. There seems to be a fair number of people in this town that suffer from the delusion that when you live rurally, the only sounds you will hear are birds singing and crickets chirping. Nothing could be farther from the truth. City living comes with a certain set of sights, smells, and sounds, just as rural life comes with its own unique characteristics. Many of us who choose to live in the country do so to pursue a way of life and certain activities that are not possible in a city. Two such pursuits that are frequently mentioned in regards to the proposed law are shooting and off-road vehicles. I believe that if this becomes law, certain individuals in this town will abuse this law to try to eliminate otherwise legal activities. Take hunting, for example. As Russ Nitchman has previously pointed out on the Danby Facebook forum, the proposed quiet hours would be in conflict with legal big game hunting hours. In addition, New York State allows the hunting of fur bearers at any hour, day or night. The proposed law would therefore also be in direct conflict with those regulations. Is there really a compelling argument to be made that we need to supersede both existing New York State law and DEC regulations? I do not think so. I feel that the proposed law is highly flawed and wholly unnecessary. In the rare case of someone making noise solely for the purpose of harassing another resident, there are existing laws to deal with such situations. The vague and subjective definitions in the proposed law will undoubtedly lead to uneven enforcement depending upon who makes the complaint and who shows up to investigate such complaint. Under the proposed law, almost any sound could be construed as unreasonable or unnecessary. I strongly oppose giving residents the ability to pick up the telephone and use this proposed law as a tool to intimidate neighbors who are engaged in lawful activities on their own property. If you doubt that that will happen, I would like to remind you all that Danby is now known as that small town with 2 newsletters. I really fear that the proposed law will create far more problems than it will ever resolve, and only encourage more conflict between neighbors. We do not need another law to further divide us. Thank you.
I would just make a mention that if you're referring to the old law, it would be really helpful if you're, alluding to the new law as opposed to the old one. Because a lot of those things have been addressed, so it's. That, yeah, the newer version of the proposed law.
When was the newer version posted? Because I looked at the law the other day and it sounds like the one that they're talking about.
Since February. It's
Then-
been on
And it still has a lot of those problems.
For everybody in here and just fall down now. Everybody in here, so we can get out of this situation, because, you know, other people got other stuff to do here.
Well, keep in mind that we don't have any law. Oh, yeah.
And what's the one on the website?
This is something that is this is something which we are talking about as a basis for what we might propose. It's not a proposal, you know, and this is not a public hearing either. So this is why we're talking about what we want to put in a law if we do a law.
Get rid of it.
Peter's been waiting on.
Sure.
And then with the hand.
Okay.
My name is Jane Dunick. I'm
Oh, wait, for front one.
Jane Dunick. I'm a landowner. And I'm going to read a statement by another landowner who couldn't be here. And his name is David Clark. And he's lived in Danby continuously since 1987. And I agree with his statement. But first, before I read it, I would like to say the officer made quite a compelling case, which kind of makes everything that I'm going to read, I hope, unnecessary. I would encourage you to go with him. But since we're still in a discussion, I will read what David wrote, and I'm in agreement with it. I find places in this draft proposal vague. The noise ordinance is based upon noise that is objectionable to a reasonable person. This is a serious flaw in the planned ordinance. What defines a reasonable person? Reasonable noise to one party may be considered objectionable to another party. The New York State Circuit Court has overturned and thrown out laws based on a reasonable person concept. Instead of the reasonable noise concept, I would suggest a benchmark standard based on dBA noise levels at property owners. dBA is an expression of the relative loudness of sounds in air as perceived by our users. Another concern, what is considered objectionable noise during the daytime hours? It is unclear if hunting and target shooting, which are traditions in rural areas such as Danby, will be allowed during the daylight hours. The draft proposal is specific with nighttime noise emissions, but it is not definite enough to give a person of ordinary intelligence fair notice that their contemplated conduct is forbidden during daylight hours. There's no process for warning an individual. The proposed law's first step is to fine or imprison an individual for the first violation. It is unconstitutionally vague as it fails to give fair notice to the ordinary citizen that the prohibited conduct is illegal. And it lacks minimal legislative guidelines, thereby committing arbitrary enforcement. I suggest that this draft ordinance be further reviewed by a cross-section of Danby residents. Not only those citizens who feel that they are being abused by local norms. Laws impact all residents of the community. Please reach out to citizens of Danby who operate machinery, hunt, or cause noise, and try to work out a system that benefits all, not a law that empowers one neighbor with restricted and financial power over another. Danby is a rural community until recently, populated largely by large open areas of forests, streams, and farming, with a population that felt unencumbered by limitations on their livelihood and recreation. In the recent years, Danby has experienced an influx of new residents, and the character of our town has changed. We would hope that our community, both new and long established, would respect our history and lifestyles, and work together to find a way to let each other enjoy this wonderful area of upstate New York.
I want to make a rebuttal to something that may make a difference. And she brought up the issue of sound meter, which I've heard people talk about. And I'm saying this in the aspect that like I said, I'm a certified radar operator, and I also wrote a policy on 10 meters, so I'm familiar with what New York requires. And I'm reading direct out of a letter I wrote to Danby a year ago. I've heard people suggest that a law be written that includes the decibel limit to sound, which would be virtually unenforceable and essentially guide people looking for relief from unreasonable noise down a blind path. Having held New York certified radar operator card, I instantly saw the parallels. Keep in mind that radar has, quote, judicial notice, unquote, in New York, meaning that principles of radar operation have already been accepted and the need to defend the operation of a radar unit and file does not need to be explained. To the best of my knowledge, sound measuring devices do not have judicial notice. So in order to sustain conviction based on a high noise reading on a sound device, all of the following have to be met. One, a law stating a certain level of noise is a violation, including a potentially very long list of exceptions, which I'm not going to take the time to read to speed it up. Two, the law must also state the tolerance of sound meter taking the reading, not just the meter, it's the tolerance of the meter. Three, manufacturer's proof of the tolerance of the sound meter used to take the reading of the defendant. Four, proof of calibration of the sound meter by an independent laboratory. Five, proof of how long the calibration reading is good for. Is it monthly? Is it annually? Six, written records proving that the sound meter has been calibrated within the required time period. All this you have to bring to trial anytime you write a summons. Seven, procedure for the sound meter to be tested immediately before and after taking a reading to use the trial. When you run radar, we use tuning forks before and after each ticket to show that it's within spec. Eight, written records showing that the sound meter was tested. I just said that one. No, the written records. You not only have to test it, you get subpoenaed, you have to bring the records proving that you tested. Nine, written policy describing the training required for anyone wishing to use the sound meter. 10, proof that the written policy for sound meter operators is fair and reasonable because it doesn't have judicial notice. 11, written record showing that the sound meter operator has received the training and possessed and passed the testing procedure. As you can see, the lack of judicial notice for sound reading shifts a huge burden on any jurisdiction attempting to introduce a reading from such a device as evidence at trial. One, in my opinion, that the burden cannot be sustained at our local level. Lastly, a further problem with attempting to introduce sound meter readings is background noise. A sound meter is going to pick up all the noise, not just the noise made by a defendant. Was there an airplane flying overhead? Were there any vehicles driving along the road? Was anyone mowing the lawn in the area? Might a neighbor been playing music on the back porch? Should the sound meter operator see behind every house to see if there's additional sound sources? If the answer to any of these is yes, you have a problem. To say no would be to discredit the witness, but there's always background noise, even if it's made by spring keepers at night. And if the witness says yes, then the witness has to prove how much of the needed sound was made by the defendant and how much was not. That's almost impossible set of facts to establish. If you want to go with decibel reading.
This was covered in the previous comment period to the other law, which is why it's not in the new one.
But it's just that, yeah. If that, and the point you're making, like, when we had 10 years or more ago, when we had, one of the things that came up early in our discussion and consideration was that should the law be objective or subjective? And there are those who say, we need an objective measure using sound meters or whatever. What you just said explains very well why that's not an appropriate way and a viable way of handling it. And that's why the language it's in this proposal and even the previous one uses subjective measures and projected to a reasonable person of normal sensibility as the standard, because that is not, although it's subject to interpretation by a judge, is not, it's not subject to all those other criteria which make it almost impossible to use it at all. So it's not in there.
How do we calibrate the reasonableness of a person?
It's up, well, that's right, it's up to the judge to decide. Let's have another person. Go ahead.
I wanted to make a statement that,
You tell me,
well, my name's, Peter Moore.
oh, Peter,
Okay, I'm a hay crop farmer in the area, Stone Mickey. So, I'd like to make a suggestion that when you take a final vote and make a decision to table this or whatever, that it be tabled for 10 years? So we don't have to go through this crap again? Being so it seems fairly intelligent that it's already been designed. Hence the officer over here. And then also, where did this get started? Where is this terrible noise that brought this town to this point? Well, the question's been asked before, but nobody answered it. So please tell me the truth. Where did this start? What noise problem did it start? Tell me the truth.
It's not any one thing.
There were, as far as I know, there were two, at least two, instances that were, caused horrendous problems for people who lived in Danby. Some of them have lived in Danby for a long time. One of them was a Howland Road problem with an industry that came in and they were running hemp. In big fires and I mean, the trucks, it was pretty bad. I mean, I felt bad. I mean, the town couldn't do anything. We got lawyers involved, we got.
How can you describe to me how it was handled? The dryer situation on Holcomb Road, how was that handled?
Well, first it was considered an ag business. And it was very complicated. They're, as far as we know, they're gone.
Okay, but
So,
did it ever go in front of the judge like the officer had said?
no.
No, why not?
Initially, it was because they were claiming it was an ag business.
Good.
Even though the material was growing, they were growing orchard and trucking over. Anyway, it was a very complicated situation. We had a lot of people involved.
Was the state trooper involved?
Yeah. It wasn't just noise, they lost power, the electricity, the road was ruined. It was a bad situation.
Okay.
So
They left.
that was the main, we're not sure what these people are doing right now.
So the noise would stop then?
As far as
Yeah, resolved itself because basically they didn't find a market for the product and the business. So, okay.
yeah.
So what was the second one?
The second one that I'm aware of, actually, I think that the first neighborhood group that got together to talk about noise was, some, not four-wheelers, dirt bikes that had, the folks, as far as I know, didn't actually even live in Danby. They, one of their brothers lived in Danby. They would come with their trucks and their vehicles, that had the mufflers fixed so they go faster and they were louder. And they drove around a neighborhood, where, people had horses, people, there were police officers who worked at night and tried to sleep during the day. And it was constant noise for days at a time. So it wasn't like, kids doing it.
Okay, so how was that handled?
That's where we, ran into the problem of, it's not a public nuisance. The law wasn't gonna help us. The cops weren't gonna come out. People tried to talk. There were at least twice, people went and tried to talk to the brother who owned the land that they would start on. And this would go all around.
Yeah, were the state troopers called that meeting?
Yeah,
And what did the state troopers
they
do?
would come,
They wouldn't come?
no.
Do we know why?
And one of the persons who had the most trouble was a police officer at Cornell. So it just,
As far as the town's power goes, were you able to contact the state troopers and ask them why?
I'm not even sure. I mean, this was a while, this was before, I think it was. I'm not sure about all the details. I don't think anybody is here from that neighborhood.
Okay,
But
so what's the noise that Elizabeth is going through?
her
Dirt
Yeah.
bikes about that. Okay, did you call the state trooper? Did you call the sheriff? How did you handle it?
Our other neighbors handled it, and it's the right next door neighbors. I mean, I think in that situation, they're actually riding on the road, but there's some, they have a trail in their yard, and the neighbors who live right next to them, spoke with them, and it turned into a big, issue. And, we were just like, I agree with you, but I can't, there's nothing, what can we do? What are the police gonna do?
Well,
I mean, I would if I just.
Call state trooper.
Well, I'm happy to do that, I just didn't know how much weight it would fall.
I think if the state troopers don't come out, there's an issue there with the state law not being enforced. So that's where the lawsuit comes in, and it drags them into it also.
But I,
Drags the state into it.
this is informative though, because I live on Government Road, and we have bikes going up and down 2 o'clock in the morning. We have bikes going up and down in the summer. 2 o'clock in the morning, up and down Gunderman Road. That is, I didn't know there was anything to do about it, so I. Right, yeah, I mean, it's good to know that we probably should try to contact someone if it starts up again. It started a little bit when it was warm last week, so I'm waiting for it to get worse.
So everybody can agree, 2 o'clock in the morning, driving a four-wheeler or whatever, no longer. 2 o'clock in the morning is agreed, right?
Or even during.
John Vanderbar on his Harley taking on the second gear.
I'm sorry, this is more than one. We have 4 or 5 going up and down Gunderman Road off of that hill, and where. Yeah. So I don't know that I'm feeling we have to make a law, but it's good to know that there's something we can do. I just figured, I mean, we've been in that house 40, 50 years. And I never had a problem for years ago.
I think maybe, I mean, what I'm seeing right now is maybe we should have another meeting and invite the state police and, the sheriff.
I like that.
And help us with this. But I don't know that if they're on the road, the other thing you should, the other day I was driving down Nelson Road and 2 kids were riding dirt bikes, but they are coming the other direction and they, turned to the down upside. And that first thing I thought of was, wow, that was like fun. But it was in the middle of the day and they weren't bothering anybody. And, the machines made some noise, but it was, but we need to have something, and if people are, we hit some walls with the legal system, but I think it would be good to have the sheriff and the state come and tell us when we can and can't call. I know you can call about dog barking.
So the reason why I brought this all up is that we're having a hard time, this group right here, we're having a hard time seeing why our leaders don't understand how the law works. And when the law doesn't show up, then we need to know where, what to do. So
Why doesn't it work? Yes, but it's kind of leading back to the people. Because we have to.
To answer this question, if law enforcement doesn't show up, that's not acceptable under any circumstance. Sometimes they get delayed and then they forget because they think it's a low priority call. But if you call law enforcement and they don't show up, you make an appointment with the zone sergeant and you say, on this date, I called in a noise complaint, nobody ever responded, I want to know why. And the next time I have a noise complaint, I expect somebody to show up. And guarantee you the zone sergeant or the sheriff will make sure an officer shows up. So that is an exception and it shouldn't happen. And to answer your concern, you have civil lawsuit recourse as well. If you have a defined property owner who's consistently making your life miserable, you can bring a lawsuit And courts very often will give an order to the other person to cease and desist, and if they don't, they're in contempt of court and they can lose the title to their property. So we have civil recourse as well as legal recourse.
And that was one of the options that I know somebody was looking at, and it actually, costs quite a bit of money to do that.
Usually if you prevail, though, you get your
Well, if
fees.
you don't for that, you know.
So I'm just saying, it's another option other than.
Some people don't have the money.
Yeah.
That's like something.
It's also not, it's not that problem in the world either. The thing is, we have heard from several people in law enforcement on both sides of this.
Yeah.
Both law enforcement officers say, I can't do anything without a local law. And others saying, well, we got the state law, we don't need a local law. You know, they can't both be right. Well, I have, one of the doctors said, in 20 years, I didn't have any problem, I just enforced the law where the law existed, I never had to bring anybody to court, but, the fact that there was a law was all that was necessary. And yet, and yet others seem to think, that there isn't any law. So if you think there's a law, whether there is or isn't, the police officer comes up and says, you're violating the law because of the noise you're making. Are you going to say, no, I'm not. You're wrong. There's no such law. Who's going to challenge the police officer, right? So 99% of the time, the officer shows up and thinks they even have a law. That's enough. Maybe they do, from what Ted was saying earlier, that was not the impression I got. No, from anyway, I'd like to. Okay.
Hi, my name is Judy Gardner. I have lived here since I'm 7 years old. In this time, we used to have a grocery store, a gas station. We did have a little hardware store, and we had a school. We have nothing now. We have nothing. The only thing we do have in Danby is a lot of abandoned houses and a lot of junk in people's yards. But yet, as a board that you were elected to be on, want to use the noise law that's already here. We don't need another attachment to the New York State law. This is a waste of your time and our time to have to come and address people that we elected to do the right thing. You are nothing but self-serving people. It's something on your agenda, not the residents of Danby. You are supposed to represent the people in Danby.
Rogan Moore, resident of Danby, live over on East Miller.
You got the mic?
Yep, I got the mic. It sounds to me like possibly a way to move forward from this is not necessarily more regulation, but to have the powers of Danby provide a avenue for more neighborly discussion between neighbors, one, and two, a avenue for the residents of Danby to obtain the proper knowledge to go forward with the officers and the judiciary system in order to solve the issues that people are having. Again, like was kind of pointed out, it seems like there's enough law on the books already. So if there is a law, but a officer is not willing to either enforce or to entertain the law, then as Danby as a whole, through the government, they should be in contact with the law enforcement to perhaps educate them on that law and or find somebody else who is willing to uphold the existing law so that these problems can be solved through that. as opposed to creating a new law or something that may not, hold up, as well as something that already exists.
And the point about the newspaper penal law was talked about, and what Ted said here somewhat at odds with what we were told regarding the public versus the private space provisions of it. And that's a point that needs clarification, I think. If in fact it does apply to that which is private property, but not the property for which the ordinance is, and that's what Ted was suggesting, then that's rather different than if it only applies to public property, i.e. the streets and the parks and so forth. So, you know, if that whole thing, one of the drivers of this whole process was, you asked the question, is there adequate law already on the books? Which is our first question, you know, why should we be?
I guess my question to that is, to what end, has that been discussed with, a legal team or law enforcement, to discuss with them what this officer over here has brought up that, is potentially already on the books and, to have a better understanding of that law. And again, the point I'm trying to make as well is you can't just talk to one person, just like maybe you get a quote to work on your house, work on anything else, do anything. You can't just talk to one person. You have to talk to a group of people and pull information from many sources in order to come up with a final solution. So if you don't get what you want the first time, you got to try and try again until you get what you want out of what you have, not necessarily just come up with something out of thin air.
Yeah, Steve, you wonder.
Sounds good. But I would have the boards.
Remember what the guy specifically asked about this. Yeah, it's been a while.
Joel, did you ever meet Ted Sweaters?
What, no, you're wrong.
I mean,
Yeah,
like,
but
quite an expert, I think he would be better up there than the way you conducted this whole thing. I mean, really. And I'm not sure that you've ever read that letter that he sent. How long ago? May of last year. May of last year. I mean, I'm just wondering if you got me. I'm trying to be respectful. I appreciate this meeting. I appreciate your time in serving. I really do. But are you really reading the things that we send in to you and that are given to you? Because he's got some great things that we're all seeing, and I hope you guys are seeing it too. And it's a source to use, but if you're never reading it, it's a waste of everyone's time. And here we are, May 31st, 22. Here we are, you know, dealing with an issue in the wrong way, as this gentleman pointed out. And
Maybe not the wrong way, it depends on whether or not
it really is wrong with it. The reason to do it is get law enforcement involved in the way that the state law is already written and enforce the existing law, not write another one that may not stand up in court. And when it's going to cost tax dollars, $20,000 to thousands of dollars, our money that you're going to spend if you make stupid laws that are not going to hold up in court, we're going to be sued, just like what happened a couple of years ago on Nelson Road with the zoning variance that cost the town more upwards of 15 grand. That was our money. As this man, lady said, it, I guess, left, you represent us. We want you to represent us. We want to have a good relationship with you, but we want to be represented. But what I see, and I put it on the Facebook page, is I see a knee jerk. One or two things go wrong in town. Case in point, the logging idea that's still out there floating around that just scares the bejeebers out of me. Probably a lot of people in this room. I mean, I'm not from around there. I didn't grow up there. Don't hold that against me, but I'm one of you. I'm a rural guy, even though I lived in New York City 29 years. We've been here since 2000. But you had two situations where you had two clear cuts.
And you didn't like, wait a minute, let me finish. And you had thousands, no, you're not gonna cut more. And you had thousands of logging jobs done in this town over the centuries that have done very, very well. A lot of people do this, but this is what you do. You have two situations that do a knee jerk, and you gotta do this law that takes away freedoms of law-abiding people who want to live free and enjoy and pursue happiness and their constitutional rights, and you want to take it away. And that's the problem. That's what you're doing with the logging thing. And then you put together a thing with only one person who is doing it. And it represents you. And a year ago in May, when we had this discussion, 2/3 of the people were against it, just like the vast majority are here. And we asked, put an equal number of people, 5 people for, 5 people against, 8 people. But no, you in that room, or whatever you're doing, you don't put a secret room together. That's all against noise being made, traditional noises, and what they're guns. A sharp sound going off is a violation of this thing. It's just wrong, Joel. It's absolutely wrong. With a logging, my suggestion to you personally was, if clear cutting is your problem, allow logging to continue without a logging law. If it's less than 40% of the timber being taken on the property, which is a select cut. But no, you want to control it all and then have a map and say architect by training. Nobody does that. They have a sheet of the board feet, how many trees are being cut. But no, you want a scale map. No one's going to do that. You're going to end all logging in Danby, and you're taking away my livelihood to make income from my property, and every other landowner whose view you own, it's your view, because you made that the town orders.
There will be an opportunity for comment on a logging law when it emerges, and it will. But it's not relevant to what we're doing. I mean, your point.
Yes, it is. It's how you guys operate.
I understand your point. The point is that it's a knee-jerk reaction to 1 or 2 people who cause a problem, and we're going to pass a law that's going to affect everybody just because of 1 or 2 people.
Oh, I mean, everybody.
Yes.
is meaningful. Everybody has valid things to say. Everybody, lives in Danby. I assume everybody here does. And everybody just wants to get along. And the noise issue it did come from people who live here. People who live here who had problems. We tried that, there were avenues that we tried, it didn't work, we tried avenues that didn't work. This was an option, a lot of places do. We're not even saying we're doing it. This is to get feedback on a draft proposal. It's not even, but you can't say that people aren't being listened to, okay? That this isn't even a public hearing, we just wanted to hear what people had to say. But we are also listening to the people who are saying, help us because we're suffering. And nobody wants to stop hunting. Nobody wants to stop people being able to ride their dirt bikes. Nobody wants to stop. Nobody, I don't know what law you're reading, but anyway, that's not even a final draft. It may not even happen. Who knows? But I just want to make the point that this was initiated because the board was listening to some people, okay, and everybody has meaning. We're all different too, so it's difficult. It's difficult.
Before we keep doing this, there are some people out there who want to speak. The fact that some people here haven't spoken at all does not tell me that some of the people who have written to us aren't even in here if possible. It is a difficult forum, and I would ask you to consider that we are not doing things secretly. We are here together. It is a little painful to be blamed for everything, but here we are. That's the way it is, and I understand that when you're a resident on the board, people can say anything they want about it. We have no recourse, and that's the reality. But right now, we have a group of people who are sitting here together. The fact is, you all are looking at us, and there's only 5 or 6 of us looking back at you. It's a little intimidating, but we don't have the other people here that only one was able to speak. But we did get a lot of letters. Many of you know I'm not a great fan of laws either. And it's been very interesting to me to see that we have people who are saying very much the same thing as each other. And none of us want, I don't think there's a single person in this room that wants to stop people from enjoying where they live. I happen to be one of those new people, quote unquote, but I grew up in the country as well. And I know Russ said he only got here in 2000. So it's not that we're new people are bad and people who live here forever are good. There's nothing about who's good or bad in this. It's an opportunity, and I think that, is it Jeremy who said that, about having meetings? It's really hard for me to understand who's speaking and what your name is, but you said. What?
Rogan?
Yeah, it's suggested, and this might be considered one of our first kinds of meetings where people can come together. It's not all comfortable, but we're doing it. We're all in here doing this. And this is, in these days and times, this is a really big deal. So I see people writing on listening from out there, the board listens, the board doesn't listen, the board listens, and it's the same person back and forth. So maybe this is what we are going to be able to do a few times a year. Maybe we can do it outside of the park sometime. But anyway, we really do want to hear from you, believe it or not. I do. And it isn't a matter of my calling you all up and asking you how you're doing. I mean, we're here twice a month in a meeting. Leslie and Joel and I go to almost all the rest of the meetings. We're here. Write to us, talk to us, but recognize that just because you're not seeing or hearing people who are having problems does not mean that they're not out there. We don't have the answer. Warren's been very helpful to point the direction of a different way to look at it. That's all. Keep talking to us, please.
I also want to point out, Article 3 of the draft law is a complete list of exceptions. And the reason we have asked for public comment is so that you all have an opportunity to voice your concerns and to add things to that list of exceptions. So, for example, we've heard about hunting at night in certain cases. That can go in that list of exceptions. We've heard about people operating agricultural equipment. That can go into the list of exceptions if you have a farm, not if you're bringing in hefty.
You don't need to ask the person.
Right, it's a given. So this law is not set in stone. The goal is to draft a law that does take into account your concern. No one is trying to constrain people from doing what they have been doing and what, as we have said, the standard is what's reasonable. So if you have something that you're worried is gonna run afoul of the law, the best thing you can do is to write to us and say, here is something that I do. I want to make sure I'm not going to get in trouble for this. We will put it into that Article 3. But to simply say you can't have any law when we know that there are people who have been affected adversely. And I'm going to go back more. What was the phrase that we used? Acoustic, sonic assault. And we have heard from those people. All right. And this is not the most welcoming crowd. It's understandable if some people don't want to put themselves in front of an antagonistic crowd. But we have heard from those people, and they also live in Danby.
they are also residents. And it doesn't, it's not a question of majority. You don't wait to have a law about murder until a majority of people have been murdered. All right, if we have citizens who have experienced these things and they have sought recourse and they have tried to use that state law and it has not worked for them. All right, many municipalities have noise ordinances for precisely that reason. Many municipalities in New York State. So we are not making this up. There is a valid concern. Your concerns are also valid. This is how democracy works. Everyone gets an opportunity to have their input in this law. No one is trying to do this secretly. Again, I would encourage you to just share your concerns and we will make every effort to incorporate that into the law. You keep telling us it's in a law, or you're trying to incorporate a law. 90% of the people in this office, in this room right here, say we don't need a law. You keep on trying to incorporate it. When everybody here in this town said, not everybody, what is it, 1% of the population here has a complaint?
Well,
there's gonna be people here.
supposedly,
You're supposed to be here, bro. Here you are. 90% of the people in this room against what you're trying to do. And we're telling you, we vote you in, and we're telling you, we don't want the law, but yet you want to speak for 1% of the population?
well, I don't think you're fair to say that the people in this room are necessarily representative of the majority of the town. It doesn't mean, and unfortunately, and Steve point I think is well taken, which is to say, this, even though most people might not have a problem, if you've got a problem, that's what the law is about. I'd like to give up the chance to speak. Let's take one from the Zoom audience. Take a drink at it. That's the most we get. So.
Hello there. Thanks for recognizing me. First thing I got to say is Joel and Leslie, your mics are not working. I'm hearing you through an echo of the room. The people in the room are much clearer than you are. You know, I've heard a lot of interesting things over the last hour or so. And one point that seems to be coming up frequently could be summarized as good neighbors. Frankly, if everybody is a good neighbor, there's no need for a noise law. If I have good relations with my neighbors, I expect them to, I expect to tell them if I think I'm going to be making some unusual noises, and I'll invite them to the party. And if one of them comes over to me and says it's a little bit loud, I'm likely to do something. And I think most people will do that. But you don't have a law. It's when you don't have good neighbors that you need a law. And mediation isn't the sort of thing that's going to help, because if the good neighbor policy doesn't work, mediation isn't going to work. You need a law. Now, a second thing that I jotted down while listening to you folks, it's sort of repeating what Steve said a few moments ago. This is the time to bring up specific concerns of how you might think that this law would affect you adversely. In other words, way back, there was some talk about farming and running tractors at night. Well, I mean, I happen to know the simple answer to that. If you're a farmer, you're very likely in an agricultural district. If you're in an agricultural district, then ag and markets law supersedes anything the town could do. And that says that you can run your tractor at night. And that's just one problem, but people should bring up specific problems. And so the town board can consider them. Now, I did hear one specific at length, and it was very interesting, and I will certainly be researching the things that were brought up, but we talked about length as to whether this law would be superseding or taking the place of, or simply unnecessary because of New York state law. It's not clear to me that this proposed law has been run by the town attorney. I couldn't hear if that was discussed, but I couldn't hear what the answer was. I think that the town attorney should simply come up with an opinion, says, yep, New York state law covers this, or nope, it doesn't. Or if it's not black and white, give an explanation of what's gray about this. And if it's gray, I think what the town should be doing for its citizens is providing basically a cookbook that says, we don't have a law. If we don't have, even if you do have a law, here are the steps toward getting a sound problem resolved if you can't do it by the good neighbor method. And perhaps in preparing that list, you'll find out whether it's possible, reasonable, for an individual citizen to get this taken care of on their own. That would justify things one way or the other, I should think. Now, way back when, now I'm back to my prepared notes, if such as they are. Warren, I think that I agree with you on two of the points that were in the write-up that was made available with the agenda. The very existence of a law is bound to act as somewhat of a deterrent to some of the more egregious violations of what that law could be. People will pay attention. And I think you are, based on my own knowledge, and actually, Leslie, you cited a couple of cases, the absence of a law has hindered doing anything about nuisances. I mean, I've been living in Danby now close to 50 years. Sorry, I'm getting old. I can't help that. And I can think of in 50 years, maybe 4 times that I thought there was too much noise out there. And let's see, one of them was handled by going over to my neighbor and suggesting that maybe he really didn't want to be shooting off fireworks on top of the gas pipeline where he had a campfire. And he went, ooh, and that was the end of that. Another time, there was a very loud party on Gunderman Road, a weekend-long party, it seemed, and it was loud enough that a mile away, it was coming into my house and I could hear it all too clearly. And again, good neighbor, I figured this is going to go away. It's no big deal. So a lot of these things do get handled. It's the cases where they can't be handled by that means you have to have some kind of procedure, and that procedure is often known as a law. Do I think that this is the best possible law you could have? No, I don't. I personally I'm an engineer. I'm a nerd, if you will. And I think that objective standards would be reasonable. I understand why law enforcement is not too anxious to have objective standards, because objective standards mean you have to have an objective means to test them. We heard that greatly described. And I'll add that it's just not cost effective. You can go out with your radar gun and get a dozen people on it like at a drop of a hat, but you're not going to use that sound pressure meter very often, and it would be a big expense. But I still like, in spite of that, I still like objective standards. And I think that those objective standards should be based on 2 things. First, let's say it's me, I have the right to go to the boundary, my property line, and talk in a reasonably loud voice. That's my right. I'm the landowner. It's my land. But I also now talk about my neighbors. No, my neighbor also has the right that if they're within their house, whatever's happening outside should not penetrate into the house at an obnoxious level. And I won't go into the science of it. You don't want me to take that long. But it turns out that if you give a distance, a setback distance of say 50 feet, my loud conversation at the property line will not be more than library quiet once you get to a window at 50 feet away. That's just physics. And so sound pressure meters, for 99 cents, you can get an app for your iPhone. I suppose it'd work on my iPad too, but I don't know. And if it's not terribly accurate, well, let's put it this way, if the limit says 65 decibels and you've got 80 decibels, you don't have to worry about accuracy. You have grounds for a complaint. Nothing is that bad. So I started to say that I think there's some flaws to this. I do prefer an objective standard, and I also see the problems with it. Specifically in this law, I don't see other relevant laws being mentioned. For example, Ag and Markets Law, which covers agricultural activity. Probably there's New York State gun law, which probably covers gun activity. Although, well, anyway, I'm a little bit troubled that that noises created by a town event are treated separately from noises created by the public. Frankly, if the town should be held to the same standards as the public. Whatever requirements there are for a public event being granted a permit should apply to the town as well. I'm a little troubled by the fact that the owner of a property is responsible for what goes on their property, even if they don't know it's happening, even if they're not present, and even if they did not give permission. Now, I understand a reasonable law enforcement officer would come to my property. In fact, some years ago, a whole helicopter and a truckload of law enforcement officers came to my property to remove some illegal plant growth that I knew nothing about, and they knew I knew nothing about it, and it didn't trouble me. But this law says that I am responsible. I have to prove that I didn't know about it, that it wasn't something in my control. I think that's a little problem. Objective. What does this say? Ag activity. Yeah, I think I've mentioned them all. And I think that, Catherine, you're right. We're all trying to listen. And this is the time to bring up things that you are concerned might affect you adversely. And I'm sure you can come up with them. And the law should, if they're reasonable concerns, and I think that we're all trying to be reasonable, I think a law would take those into account. Frankly, I remember living downtown. That's one of the reasons I'm living in Danby now. I was living downtown in close proximity to my neighbors. And there was some gentleman who insisted on warming up his tires, revving the engine and squealing the tires on Saturdays at 8 in the morning for a period of a half an hour. He got those tires good and warm before he got out of his driveway. And then there were the mornings with the garbage trucks. We don't have those noises out here. That's why we're here. Actually, as was noted earlier, some people are here because they grew up here, and I think that their rights should be respected. But for those of us who moved in because we didn't want to hear the squealing tires, the garbage trucks and whatnot, there has to be some consideration for us too. And that's back to the good neighbors. And I think I've gone on long enough. I'd like to see this town do something about it. I'd like it to be reasonable. Maybe this is a good start. Maybe there's something better, but we got to do something. And it's covering not the everyday activities, but the exceptional ones where good neighboring just doesn't work.
So, first of all, my name is Jessica Pansky. I moved here with my husband in Villa House about 4 years ago now, and we moved out here to be next to family. And we want to do all the things that make lots of noise with our 2 little kids, like ride 4-wheelers and eventually teach them how to hunt. And I don't feel there's a need for more laws to infringe on our rights, so we don't feel like we can live our life to the fullest. And that being said, I do have young children that need to go to bed at a reasonable hour. So if we are not voting on something here tonight and you're just gathering information, at what point are you going to come up with something for all of us who are against this to come back and vote it down? Because the people who are for it apparently don't feel they are comfortable enough to show up here. And if those same people aren't comfortable enough to show up here, they're not comfortable enough to reach out to their neighbors and be adults and work out their own problems. And that's all I want to know is, at what point are we going to be able to vote this down? Because I don't have all night to stay here and say why I don't like that.
Well, I can answer that question. There will be no opportunity for the people to vote anything up or down because New York State doesn't allow it. So the town board will decide whether or not there will be a law and what's going to be in it. There'll be ample opportunities, there already has.
How to get in and under it.
Did you just say that the town board votes it and the public here has nothing to say about it? Is that what you said?
What I said was,
But you want to be embarrassed. That's a boss.
that's not what I said.
That's it.
That's not what he said.
What I said is,
We're talking about New York law, just let it finish.
what I said was,
I don't know what you said. This was going on. You guys are gonna make a decision. Not what's going on right here. You see, listen to us now. You got people walking out because I can't even believe that you would even consider that. Never just more against it. That's right after the meeting before us. But you're still turning around down in front. I mean, this is enough, is enough.
We're not, nobody's trying to ram anything down.
People were telling me what to do.
Okay,
Go talk to the people, get it settled. No.
we are,
Not being involved.
there are other people in Danby. I want to point out that if you count the number of people in this room, and you count the number of residents in Danby, I'm sorry, but you guys don't represent a majority of the people that live in Danby. There's like 3,000 or 4,000, and maybe much smaller numbers here.
I mean, it's.
What I would like is comments, about what the worry, what the worries are, what you feel like. It's not.
Go ahead, why don't you look over there?
I got just something quick to say. Last, I think it was February or March, there was an online survey about either voting for the law or not. And it came out just about 2 to 1 against the law.
Okay,
And
what law? Oh,
I mean, the survey response was,
what?
you're saying the people who responded to a survey.
Right, it was like 2 to 1 against it.
and how many people on both sides?
I didn't hear that.
188, 112. 188, 112 at the May meeting a year ago.
And,
Okay, that is not quite a majority of the people now.
Wait, go ahead, Gary, just finish what you're saying.
then on the Danby Southfield webpage, I know you all watch the conversation going on there. I can see one person in favor of this law. Plus, I don't know how the town board can continue on this law, because 3 of them, 3 of you guys have publicly said you're for the law.
Who said?
I'm not gonna say who, 3 of you guys have said you're for the law. Sure. 3. I'm not gonna say who. 3 of them.
I would say that
You were one.
I have said that I think we need a law, not necessarily this particular one, but that statement is based on a premise that there is nothing in law currently that would serve. And that was what we were told.
The disorder of the county.
Well, then I'm hearing from Ted tonight that there is a law and that it will serve. But, so we need to check that out because it's contrary to, what probably different lawyers have told us. And it may have been contrary to what Guy told us too. I'm trying to remember what he said about this. That effectively, there's no reasonable recourse for somebody without a local law.
Well, you can still take the Supreme Court and file a case like one of the town board members. did.
Sure, but if you're having a problem with your neighbor taking it to the Supreme Court, it's not something you're gonna do tomorrow morning.
Well, I had them once already.
Right?
I mean, I just want to say once again, that the only thing I'm interested in is trying to find some resource for the many people who have, there may be one complaint, but there might be 30 people that are impacted by that complaint. Ball Hill area, there may be 50 people that are impacted by that complaint. I mean, so there are a lot of people that are impacted. And as far as I'm concerned, this whole thing got rolling to try and help those people out that have had issues and haven't had any way to solve their problems. And until, companies moved away or kids decided that they heard about, the law being contacted, so they stopped riding the bikes on the hill over there, so things do happen and go away sometimes, but I feel like I would like to help those residents that had problems. And law may not be it. It may be getting the sheriff and the troopers in here. You tell us that the penal law isn't working. It will not work because it's gotta be a public nuisance. So there's lots of things we can do, but I mean, I haven't heard anybody say, at the last time, I was not interested in a noise law. I would consider it if it would help a lot of people, but, I haven't heard anybody, I don't know who those four people are, who they are,
Has there been a record made of the complaints?
yeah, there are lists of, they're out there. Actually, now that I think about it, there is a long list. That's why we have.
Is that
we have-
publicly
we
disclosed?
have people, everybody's comments about this law, which I'm also worried. It sounds like some people have the wrong version, which we need to take the first draft off of the website. So, but, there is a list.
And is that list publicly available
I can make it.
without mentioning names?
I can work something up and put it on the website.
We did, Lincoln, wasn't until this afternoon, I got, town clerk, linked, to the agenda, under correspondence, all of the comments that have been submitted by email to the town board. But if you wanted to see what people have submitted, electronically, you weren't here tonight.
Comments on the proposed law or
Yeah.
comments on the noise ordinance?
On the noise law.
I guess I'm referring to the specific noise complaints.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
that's also available, okay.
well,
Well, it's not yet.
No, well, it could, yes,
3 days.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. That's right.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that I believe in due process and representative government. I just want everybody to know I don't approve of the yelling, the shouting, and the finger pointing. I think that's counterproductive, so don't put me in the same category. 3 comments. One, the board said that the proposed draft, and you said I was looking at the wrong one. Turns out I was not. I was looking at the current one. But one board member said that this does not regulate firearms, and I quote, during nighttime hours, the following acts are not prohibited. Number 4, the use of explosive firearms or similar devices. So yes, it does in fact address firearms in there. Second point is you made an interesting comment I think might be part of what's going on with misunderstanding. You said that many, I don't know if you use the term municipalities or jurisdictions, have had success with local ordinances. The key thing there is they have their own law enforcement. So in other words, if the city of Ithaca passes a city ordinance, the city can send the Ithaca Police Department to enforce their own local ordinance at their discretion. Danby has no local law enforcement. So what you pass locally, you cannot then turn around and send the Danby Police Department to enforce it. You're back to the sheriff or the state police. So that's a key difference when you're looking at other areas or other jurisdictions that have had lots of stuff like that.
That's a good point. The sheriff is our law enforcement.
Correct. And I've heard multiple times people saying you need a law or there's no other law. And as I've said, the sort of conduct, and I keep hearing the reference about public places, et cetera. And I'm just, for this evening, I'm going to hand my copy to you guys. And it's straightforward, and it's number 2 that makes unreasonable noise. So you can look at it. Okay, well, I'm not seeing where it says anything have to do with a public place. So I've heard that more than once, and I don't know where that's coming. Read the intro.
It's stated in the preamble. Disorderly conduct with intent to cause public inconvenience.
Public inconvenience, doesn't say public. What that means is the general public, not a specific person. So You don't need a specific complainant, all you need to show is that it's a general problem, but it doesn't say public location, there is a difference.
Hi, my name is Mauricio Medina, and I think what I'm hearing a lot here is that, first of all, this is a very badly written proposal. And I would like to see the town board move in a direction of trying to get clarification as to whether or not this law that Ted was referencing, how applicable is that to our particular situation, and the fact that maybe more of a case that law enforcement has not responded adequately, even though they are obviously probably, have the jurisdiction to do so. So I would like to see the town move in that direction and just really back away from this proposal and try to see, resolve this in a way of getting law enforcement to be accountable to our, our request to look into these complaints when they do come around. Anything beyond that, it seems like it's control, in the sense that we don't want to go down a path where we start controlling what our neighbors can and can't do on their land. If we're not intentionally trying to harm somebody else, putting a law in place that's going to potentially restrict my ability to do any number of things that I would like to do. I have a small farm. I like to run equipment long times. I have a shop where I do a lot of different things that may impact my neighbor because we're close enough. And if he chooses, or my neighbors choose to just kind of turn these laws against me and restrict my ability to do something on my land, that's kind of a pretty shitty place to be in at the end of the day.
I think I agree that the first thing needs to be clarified. The state law, who enforces the state law. So in fact, we're not talking about not having a law. We're talking about having a law in existence at the state level, not at the town level, and making sure it gets enforced. So that seems to me to be the first step we do need to look at. But I want to make it clear that what we're talking about then is not having no noise law. It's just not a local one. It's a state one. So we're talking about the state already has, at least the claim is the state already has a law in place.
So why?
Because we have heard differently, and that's why we need to verify. We have heard differently that at one, there isn't anything at the state level. Two, that the local people will not enforce it. And three, we've heard from other people in law enforcement that there is nothing that they can do. That then needs to be the first thing we need to look at. Why that's stated, and then what we get when we do it.
One more here.
And I agree with what Pat just said. The impetus for this is a conclusion that there is nothing out there that addresses the need. If there is something out there that addresses the need, it's just a matter of educating law enforcement about an existing law that is applicable. Then I don't think any of us are going to pursue a local law that would duplicate that existing law. So we'll check that out before we go any further. Thank you. Somebody, yeah.
Hi, my name's Chrissy. I am here with a letter from the Danby Community Church that came out right. All right, the Danby Community Church is interested in discussing the proposed town of Danby noise law. The church appreciates the town's purpose in promoting public health, peace, comfort, welfare, and safety, in quotations. An important component in that endeavor is recognizing the social, mental, and spiritual advantages provided by community gatherings. Inevitably, gatherings make noise. The question is how much noise is too much noise. It is not clear how this law will affect the church and our neighbors' day-to-day and seasonal activities. Our immediate concern is with the draft's lack of definitions for several of the terms. The words excessive, disturbing, unreasonable, and or unnecessary are subjective. Although an attempt is made to define unreasonable noise, the descriptors themselves are subjective. A noise that annoys one person or disturbs that person's sleep can be normal and unremarkable to another person. The added phrase, excessive, unnatural, or unusually loud in their time, place, and use, or which is detrimental to the environment, adds further confusion. How will the town measure excessive? What is the difference between natural and unnatural noise? Presumably, a coyote yipping is natural, but what about a dog barking or a human singing? Without a specific definition, an argument could be made that all of these are natural. How do we know if the noise damages the environment, and how would the town assess the damage? The factors listed in section 2, paragraph 2, also are subject to arbitrary and capricious application. A noise ordinance needs to have volume, intensity, and duration defined by stating the limits in decibels and A-weighted decibels. The absence of these parameters is an obvious omission. The words unnecessary and unreasonable appear again in section 2, paragraph 3, this time regarding noise from vehicles, machines, or signaling devices. What is unnecessary and how long is too long? For example, a farmer under pressure from seasonal and weather restraints may need to turn on tractor headlights and continue field work well past 9:01 p.m. Will the farmer violate this law because someone is disturbed? A quotation mark. The Danby Community Church hosts outdoor concerts for the public in July and August. Although the concert itself may end before 9, cleanup and conversation outdoors often extend longer than that. As written, if someone decides cleanup noise and conversations are annoying, a subject of judgment, this or any similar neighborhood gathering would be violating the noise law. The exceptions include municipally sponsored concerts and special events, which apparently can make as much noise as they want for as long as they want. This appears to disregard the time-honored principle that government, as well as citizens, is subject to existing laws. Hang on all a second. Another exception is daytime operations of religious institutions, an apparent nod to the United States Constitution's First Amendment. But what about nighttime operations? Several faith traditions conduct worship services outdoors at night during specific seasons of the year. Absent clear, measurable, objective parameters, the noise law as drafted is subject to misuse and government overreach. We hope that the town of Danby government will address these issues and we will appreciate the response to our concerns.
It would be helpful, for folks to read the present law. We'll make sure that the other one's struck, but again, you're alluding to the old law and not.
Right. Well, the hours are still 7 and 9. 9 to 7. That's really cool.
There's something in one of their things.
This might be, we're gonna kind of hold this for you. Thank you. You're probably good to use this one. Yeah. Is it on? Yeah. My name is Tom Clements. I live on Gunderman Road, 7th generation, very proud of it, to live in this town. I just starting against the noise ordinance. But I would contest that Danby is a very, very quiet place. It says right here, settled in 1795, and we're probably the quietest that we've ever been. And I'm gonna talk about history. This book, you probably might be familiar with it, written by Wayne Myers, resident of this town. In that, we had a railroad station in West Danby. Believe me, that wasn't quiet. I'm sure that wasn't quiet. That was a great hub for economic reasons. Right in here, there's my own relatives, my great-great-grandparents raised flowers and put them on the train and sent them to New York City, along with there's other things like sheep and things that none of that is quiet, and all of that is prosperity. And a quote from this: it says, "The sight of smoke, the smell of the sulfur ash, and the sounds of the steam whistle and the iron rails were welcomed by the Baldwin community." need a rural character, and I hear that rural character used a lot of times, and they want to protect the rural character again. This book is rural character, and it wasn't quiet. Further on, pictures here, we got big threshing machines, steam powered tractors, none of which was ever quiet. I'm certain neighbors heard a steam powered engine a long way away. Further on, here's another steam milled, steam powered logging equipment. And it goes on to say how so many of the houses around here were built with the lumber from here with steam powered. Further on, there's a whole chapter dedicated to just Michigan Creek alone. 8 different dams down through there with brick mills and again logging and sawmills. We're much wider than we ever were in the past. No one ever needed a law then. We don't need a law now. History tells us that, you know, I know things are different today. They say that there's now, we don't have all those steam engines and all that, but all of those things were still the sound of people's lives, their prosperity and freedom. And so the noises that we hear today are still prosperity, people's lives, and people's freedom. I do not believe in any kind of law whatsoever. Thank you.
But I do want to point out that there already is a state law that has to deal with it, which means it already exists, but that's what we needed to confirm with it.
One comment, that, you know, we've talked about guns, we've talked about four-wheelers. What about just wanting to have a party at your home for your family and you play music for a couple hours into the evening? This law doesn't say anything that addresses that. So at 9:01, I have to turn the music off. I think that's a little bit over the top. I want to be able to have my family come to town, have a party at night, maybe once every 10 years, and be able to enjoy it without anybody coming knocking on my door and telling me to shut it down. Simple request.
I can give you some input on that. The city of Ithaca has what they call noise permits. And what happens is if you want to have a party once every 10 years, you apply, you say, I want a permit. They grant you permission to have your party to make the noise. And the benefit of that is you can't do it all the time. So if you have a problem, let's say somebody's making noise every single night, driving the neighbors crazy, they will not be given permission to have a permit every single night. If you occasionally want to have a party and make some noise, you get the one-time permit that lists the hours. It will say you can make noise up to 10 p.m. and then it has to stop. And if anybody complains, it's real simple for law enforcement. They say, well, they have a permit. They go to the house, they show them the physical permit, and then they go to the complainant and say, they have a permit till 10 p.m. If they're still making noise, call us back. We've already spoken to them. And that's how you can have occasional excessive noise, but not constant, regularly excessive noise. It varies. It depends on what's happening. Right. So the city of Ithaca decides the totality. If somebody wants to have a block party in college town. I'm saying there is no there's nothing in statute. They look at the totality. If you want to have a block party in College Town, they might let it go till 2 a.m. If you want to have a block party in Bell Sherman, they'll say it's got to be done by 9 o'clock because there's an elementary school or school kids. So they look at the totality. Again, it's back to quote reasonableness. They look at totality. They issue the permit. So people who occasionally want to make noise are not denied, and people who don't want noise every night don't have to put up with it. It's a very, very effective system.
President was going to say that is, I was just going to say, I've been looking at those county because.
It's not working.
It's not working?
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
There we go, that wasn't, okay. I don't know if this can answer your exact question, but Ulysses has a noise ordinance that goes into effect at 11 p.m. And Ithaca has a noise ordinance that goes into effect at 10 p.m. I couldn't find one for Lansing. I don't know, does the town board here know if Lansing has a noise ordinance, what time it goes into effect? 11? Okay, I doubt Enfield or Carolina or Newfield, but I was just, concerned about the rest of the county. So the two I found was Ulysses has 11 p.m. Ithaca has 10 p.m.
I did know that the last time that this noise issue came up, one of the things people really, I heard really clear, was that people didn't want to have to go get a permit. To have a party. So, I know something like that might work, but I heard that people were not interested in having to go get a permit. And, it's an impromptu party or something, so and that was for something.
Pretty close, probably. We have to.
Depends on where you are.
But people just didn't want to have, they wanted to be able to have spontaneous, or do that and then plan ahead and get here by, Friday at 3 to get a permit for Sunday, it just wasn't something people were interested in.
And that becomes the avenue of being neighborly, and that's been mentioned a few times, so maybe perhaps this could be morphed into not a law per se, but more of a public Danby avenue to talk with each other as opposed to having a law.
Recommended practices.
So one of my a couple of problems with the proposal is your time constraint. 9 p.m. starting, it's not even dark in the summer, people are almost 10. So this lady over here that left said it's overreach, and I agree with that. I think a lot of people in this room feel that it's overreach. The other is the penalties. A $200 fine and a $500 fine, really, a trespass. If someone comes on my property, criminally trespasses, $100 the first time, $100 the second time, $100 the 10th time. If I go too fast down this road and get points on my license, there's fines in 3 years. This law is for 5 years, so the first offense.
18 months.
Oh, it's 18 months. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're being, I don't know what the word is, you're being over controlling and domineering and way overreaching. Saying, it's excessive. If you do it twice in 6 months, I could see up. But in 5 years, so if I bark too loud, I'm sorry to be like that, and my neighbor is offended by it, the way it's written, and it goes before the judge, and the judge is not reasonable like a current judge, and is some unreasonable person who reinterprets the law, like we're seeing happen around the country, which could happen in Danby at some point. And they say, yeah, that was too loud a noise, Richmond. And then 4 months, 11 years, and 28 days later, I do the same thing again. I get another, really? I mean, it's like, Warren, I would love for you to explain the thinking behind that, other than being like really hard on a neighbor. What is the thinking behind it? And I'll say one other thing. So I do appreciate what you guys are doing as town board, and I'm not against you guys. I do have a problem with the things that you're doing and the way you're doing with knee jerk. I really do. I hope you're hearing me and others on that. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate your service. And I think this lady who was bothered by the motorcycles, I get it. There's a little balance there. We had people ride motorcycles up on 96 every afternoon, an hour before dark. Out came their mini bikes and it was annoying. I lived with it. They moved on. It happened for 2 years, and it just happened in the summer months. It's like, all right, it didn't ruin my life, but it was annoying. So but the people with that mill, that was the cannabis mill, that sounded horrific. I think something, I wish something could have been done. I have compassion for people who have issues with that, but I also don't want our freedoms taken away. So what's the thinking behind that one? If you could answer that, please.
The
penalties for offenses, this was just, so any of the things that are in this law. Approximately 400 laws. Were sifted down, so comparable communities in terms of the balance between residential and rural. Were taken, population, so comparables were created, and none of those. This is really just a sifting out of that. So this is curating everything in New York State, New Jersey, Connecticut, hundreds and hundreds of noise ordinances laws. And so that's what this came out. So any person who shall violate any of the penal provisions of this shall be guilty of the violation pursuant to the penal law and shall be punishable by a fine of not more than $250. Or imprisonment for not more than 15 days or both. The continuation of an offense for each day, 24 hours shall be deemed as distinct and separate offense. That's what the law.
But again, that is where public comment is
Exactly.
important. If people want the deadline to be 11 p.m., then that can be incorporated. If people want the penalty to be
$10,
that can be incorporated. This is not-
How about
so-
page one?
Yeah.
This is literally, so if you take the entire thing and pour it in a bucket and sift it out. In terms of, this is how often it shows up in hundreds of noise laws. This is literally how this happened.
I'm glad I closed my ice cream store.
Oh, we are.
Well, I'm just saying that you spend 2 weeks in jail and what, 5 minutes?
Just here, one of them freezes.
You have to produce a really egregious amount of noise to really cause somebody some trauma. They have to contact law enforcement. Law enforcement has to come out and deem that it's a clear and present form of harassment or disorderly. So there's lots of levels to this that are truly aren't going to
Scare us. We're short staffed now. We bring this into light and we got 3,500 people that are now in Danby thinking, just gonna call the sheriff. I would suggest to have a few of those people present at the next meeting to get their point of view on this, because it really affects them.
Well, I mean, you do that as well, all the time. It's not like we're doing something different in Danby. It's already the case in the town and the city of Ithaca. But, you know, on the fine, you know, it's up to, not $250. If the judge wants to make it $10, the judge can make it $10.
I'd like to reiterate that last comment, just that if we are really looking at targeted specific instances, which has been, you know, the theme of the night, that we're trying to really make sure these targeted specific instances are remedied, why cast such a really huge net? I'm concerned because I own a business here, and it says that, you know, anybody who decides they're annoyed by a sound can call the police, you know, or any prolonged sound that is unnatural. And that's just an incredibly wide net to make me really nervous. You know, I've invested my life savings in a business here, and I'm worried about one neighbor that really wants to just be annoying. What recourse do I have? I'm very concerned.
Of course, already. I guess that they are able to call the police already. And that, I don't know about that, but I don't know, you know, Central Cyrus considered, you know, public nuisance, but.
If I have one neighbor.
I know.
Yeah, and then, you know, for the people is.
I mean, that's a concern of this whole thing, because there are very few businesses in town, but there are some, and sometimes they might generate some noise. And, you know, I know that.
There's a person online that's been trying to have his hand up for a very long time. Please let him talk. I don't know.
Mark the game.
Who?
The one in the corner with the pianist.
Yeah, right. The, people who it doesn't identify themselves, call Blake the town board. Is that Mark?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'll make these short. When I drove by the town, the village offices tonight, there was not a parking space allowed, so this must be a pretty important issue. The gentleman, the state policeman from Gunderman, he was right on everything. He spoke for a little bit longer than 3 minutes, but I'll speak for less, so I will donate all my extra time. I will yield it back to the January 6th committee. The law, the two board members stated, the two gentlemen on the end, that's incorrect because I'm an attorney. The standard should be objective, not subjective. I have everything that is complained about in the law on my property. As a matter of fact, our power just went out for a whole 24 hours. And thank God I had a Generac generator, which would be a violation. Just to let you know, I do have it timed out, and I did flip the breaker so I wouldn't electrocute a NYSEG worker. No Danby noise law is needed. I'm the guy who made those signs. I can't believe the board outlawed logging in Russ Nitchman, Alan Wagner, Steve Barber, or Steve Wilcox did not bring you to court, because that's a violation of your civil rights. Passing a law like this would just ask for a lawsuit versus the board, like somebody else said. And this is our time for public comment. We're supposed to have 3 minutes. The board should not be commenting here. You should let us, because like I said, in the parking lot and across the street in the bus parking lot, Daisy Lane from Bill Johansson, there's cars, a whole ton of cars parked across the road. Thank you.
I didn't get that last comment.
He's basically alluding that there's plenty of people here to voice their opinions, because the parking lot was completely full,
Yeah, it's
flowing.
No, good crowd for sure.
So
If I could just follow up with Steve said, I'm not trying to talk too much, but, our town, what it needs are Steve Sullivan. We need business desperately, and I hope the town board appreciates what this man has done. I know that there were parking problems down the road with so many people coming, and I think that's all been cleared up. And, but we need businesses like that, and it's a great thing for our community, because it brings people together. There's people coming there whenever you're open. There's a crowd of people. And I bet you if you were to survey those people, their well-being, their happiness, and that's what we need to be supporting. People's happiness, well-being, enjoying of life literally, pursuit of happiness. That's got to be our goal. We need to be supporting men like him, and we need to be welcoming businesses into our town. And I mean, even your next issue that you come up with, this short-term rentals. Tourism is the number 2 revenue producer in our town, behind Cornell and Ithaca. If you restrict that and limit those, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're destroying your source of income. I just, because of one guy, Beardsley Lane in 96 feet, that's what precipitated. That's the knee jerk I'm talking about, Joel, that you were opposing me. I know the law is not the issue, but I've seen it time and time again. I've been at many of these meetings over the years. We need you to lead us in a way that's helpful. Let me give you a case in point. With this whole noise thing, you're the town supervisor. Go sit with the sergeant or the captain, or whoever it is at the state trooper barracks or the sheriff. I'm sure have you done that? I'll assume you haven't. But that would be a way to do it. Say, what can you do? And then read this man's comments and go even with him. Say, will you come with me? And he can read the law to that captain or whoever it is and say, why aren't you doing this? And ask them, and really get law enforcement to do their job. And I'm very pro law enforcement.
I think there are heroes. I'm very pro on law enforcement, but get them to do their job, and then we don't have them help us. And all the angst that we've had, you guys have had angst. I mean, you guys are in it very bad. Catherine, you said it well. You're not in a good position. But neither are we. I mean, people were upset here. And just, saying things that were rude because they're mad and they're upset. We could have avoided all that if we're really working with each other and doing that. That's really what I'm trying to say.
I guess it's a good time I'll segue on that. The letter that I read partly from that I submitted last May, my closing comment was, if you feel that I can be of any additional help, please feel free to contact me. I have not received one single outreach from anybody here.
Yeah, there's a number of people who have asked to be involved in the crafting of some version of this to take it forward, and it's always been one-sided.
Well, I mean, this meeting is typically about.
Right, but the idea is that we could have sat down with Warren, we could have sat down with other people who are involved, having some of the problems, whatever, in a smaller group with a sort of representative cross-section of the people that are involved in the issue, both with problems and with fears. And we could probably have worked out stuff a lot quieter than it's gone on tonight, and come up with a consensus between the different ends of the spectrum, and then brought that forward rather than something that seems to be tilted pretty much one way and everybody's taking pot shots at it, which has got to feel terrible, to the people who crafted it. But people have been trying to become part of this process and keep being rebuffed. Why don't you have an open committee to talk about the noise law? Make it open to 10 or 12 people, make sure it's a balanced group, and then let us have meetings and we'll talk about it. We can bring forward all the different things that people have talked about here. We can reach out to the people that we know on both sides of the issue and gather in their stuff into a smaller group, kind of funnel it down. And then if there has to be a noise law, and I don't think there needs to be a noise law, but if there's going to be one, it needs to be a consensus that respects the rights of both sides. And that's not the process that I've been seeing happen.
I think, just a quick response, but it's not specific, but I think one of the things that keeps happening is that somebody reads something, gets it slightly off what it really was, puts it out there, other people read it, they hear it in, like we all hear in our own vein of understanding, and then we start getting mad, and then we engage somebody else to get mad too. And so, I mean, maybe one way we could do things is stop using words like law, words like rules. Maybe we could say something like a discussion about issues. And let people come, because there may be other issues that people don't bring. We don't know, but we have a tendency to use words that make I jokingly said, I put extra antiperspirant on tonight because I figured that this might be what it was like, and I'm actually relieved. It was uncomfortable, but a bunch of you stuck around with us. And I'm relieved that we have this calmer part of it. I'm glad for, sorry, I can't remember your name. Yes.
Just like the corner.
And I'm glad that you, actually, when my friends had the cat to try to name something, and then one person in the family said, why don't you just call it chair? So they went to the International Dictionary type thing and found the word for chair in a Czech word, and it's Zedel, and that's what they named that cat, so I call him chair half the time. But anyway, I think that, and I was saying, to Kevin earlier, it's something that makes us laugh a little bit sometimes, so we can just lower the temperature. And I think that it's fair to say that we have heard, what we heard before was the complaints about, can't you do something? And once we started saying, I don't know, but maybe, and it came up in a meeting, then the rest of people who don't want to hear those kinds of things then started to say something. And the people who first said, can't you help us? were in it, they were at a loss for what can happen then. That's not well said, but I hope it makes sense.
I just wanted to say something about just size. I have 0 horses in this race. I really do. I am right down the middle, and ultimately what the board decides to vote on, whether they vote it up or vote down. Oddly, I don't want to sound cynical or jaded, but to some degree, I don't care. My entire job in here was literally to survey hundreds of existing noise laws. And so when we're talking about size here, there's literally nobody crafted from a direction or side. This is literally sifted from existing noise laws in townships across these federal states. This is what exists now. So it doesn't come from any bias or any direction. This is literally, this shows up 200 times. So this becomes a section. This shows up 250 times. This is the basic thing. And then going through, we pulled permitting because folks, it seemed like folks felt like they needed to get the permit to do anything. And so it's like, okay, that was the big thing that we heard last time. And then the rest of it, penalties could be $5, could be $50. These are literally things that come from ordinances and laws from across states. So this is literally just a starting point that, hey, we need a law. Like, okay, this is what's out there right now. This is what exists in a bazillion townships that are just like Danby, not cities, not totally rural, but in this mixed comparable kind of thing. This is what exists out there. And in interviews that I have, I'm not doubting anybody's word, but in who I talked to in law enforcement who did not want to be on the record and pulled into this, said to me that present law, there's nothing that covers this, that they would feel like they were standing on 2 feet to intervene in. So what I think is absolutely needs to happen is not just consulting, not just second party or third party. I think literally somebody has to be sitting in the chair and willing to go on the record and say, I will support this law. I will send my people to enforce this law. And if it doesn't exist, we're back to this question of if we feel the need for a law, then you got to generate it.
To me, I mean, we could have avoided a lot of grief. If it had been determined from the get-go that there's an existing law that addresses the situation adequately. But that's not the impression I got, and you got multiple lawyers weighing in saying there's nothing out there that suffices. We got law enforcement coming in on both sides of the issue. I was saying, in 20 years of being in law enforcement, I've enforced the law, and I've never had to take anybody to court. Not a problem. We have others saying we can't do anything unless there's a local law. So which is it anyway? Now, what I got from tonight was that maybe there's a law. If there is a law, then we need to talk to law enforcement about whether or not they're willing to enforce the law as it exists. Because that, if there is a law, if it deals adequately with the situation, and if we have law enforcement people willing to use it, then we don't need one. And that should be the starting place. If we do need one, then we're at the point where we were tonight. Well, how's this one? What's a starting place for what we have? Well, we've gotten some good comments tonight on how we would modify, what Warren has said. Well, here's something that's in most of them, and we can adjust it if we need it. But obviously, we need to determine from the get-go whether we do need it.
Just a simple question, Joel, will you go to the state trooper barracks and to the sheriffs? And maybe you invite this gentleman to go with you and have that discussion with them?
Well,
As our representative or town supervisor, that would solve this whole thing, because we may have bad lawyers who interpret the law, in a wrong way. And if you go to the people that enforce it,
you'll get it straight from the horse's mouth, the people who will come out and respond when there is a grievous stuff. But when I read this, this doesn't say anything about the grievous stuff. If there's anything that annoys or harms or does it, it's so subjective. Listen, there's a person up there, we all know who it is, I'm not gonna say her name, who is offended by anything. You know, she's out there measuring trucks and cars going by her house with a decibel meter and calling the state troopers and complaining about that. And listen, if she was my neighbor and, oh my goodness, my truck made too much noise going up and down my driveway, and this law existed, the cops would be at my front door. The way this is written is not saying egregious. I mean, this is Warren Hart and his impetus behind it, but read just for what it is, it's so open. It's daytime or nighttime. It's not just saying in the nighttime hours, it's saying anytime. Anytime I make an unnatural noise. Listen, all of us right now are making unnatural noises, even in breathing. That's not natural. Humans are not considered part of nature. If you talk to a lot of people, we're the problem with the whole earth, right? We're ruining the earth because we're not part of nature. Yeah.
I think it's a good idea for us to again try to master. But I want the police to come here.
We will have that interaction, but we might have it here.
Yeah. 1.5 years.
Yeah, right there.
You guys have a lot of that.
Well,
It's gonna be hard to imagine. Why can't we go to the police barracks and meet with the captain or the sergeant? And talk to them about our problems and say, can we have you find out what it is and bring it here and have him come over to open hearing?
How about you give us a chance to digest this evening?
What's that?
How about you give us a chance to digest all that happened this evening and let us, perhaps that's one of the things we could do. But right now, this is a little overwhelming and you can send that little note to us too. Don't think that we won't do something and please don't go saying the town board doesn't do anything and they do everything in secret. Give us a little bit of slack right now.
I'm not asking you, I'm asking.
I know, but Joel is 1 in 5 of us. We are all responsible. The whole board is responsible. And we might not want him to go by himself.
I mean, I feel like we've had enough individual conversations with police officers, sheriffs, deputies, whatever, and we've gotten information that's conflicting. I'd like to have them all in the room at the same time so that we can ask specifics about specific situations. You know, why wouldn't you come out when Helen Road residents were suffering? You know, why didn't you come out when people couldn't sleep? You know, so that's what I don't want any like individual people going out and having little conversations. I'd like to have a meeting that would be people to listen to.
I'll reiterate his question that answer. Will you go to speak to the sheriff, deputy, or the sheriff, or the state police? Will you?
I will speak to the sheriff. Whether I'm gonna do it in person or not.
In person. And again,
I'm not gonna do it.
I haven't answered the question. You haven't answered.
I may or may not.
For you as some leadership, as the town supervisor, you ask the direct question, will you go possibly yourself personally and get to the bottom of this? If this had been done a long time ago, we wouldn't be here doing this at all. If there was, you haven't answered the question yet.
Well, the answer to the question is I may or may not go in person. But that doesn't mean I won't talk to him in person. It will probably be over the phone. I don't have to be I go to the office.
Yeah.
For us, it would help put to task, and put them to task to do something about it more, it's more formal, it's more, it gives more incentive to be in person.
Well, I'm not sure I agree, but I'll contact him in my capacity as town supervisor, and probably will end up inviting him to come to talk to the town board. And others that would be invited to come as well, to have that conversation. But before we even do that, I think we're going to do a little bit of research about, what about this law?
Correct, the New York, the standing New York State law you're referring to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, you know, if our lawyer confirms what Ted has been saying here tonight, then I'm gonna go to the state police, and I'm gonna go to the sheriff and say, how come we're not enforcing this law, which exists and which could be used?
Perfect. Is there all,
And we'll see what he said.
is there also a Danby standing avenue, I guess I could say, is for complainants to come in and for the Danby board to, or court to point them in a direction of solving some of these issues per se?
I think what's even more useful is that we need some, publicity that provides information out to everybody in the town about what things are possible.
Correct. And as they arise, but they have to arise, so it has to come inward first before it goes out. So is there an avenue for people to bring complaints and then beyond that, they have to be able to bring the stuff to Danby, but then there also has to be something for them to, like in this instance, like, oh, you can contact this person, you can contact that person, you can call here, these laws, so on and so forth.
And you can always come to a meeting, you can always call.
Okay.
Or email, any of them, our emails are out there, our phone numbers are out there, but, then there's also, there is a spot on the website, should be right on the front page. If you have comments or complaints about anything, we've actually gathered a lot of complaints that you were wanting to list of the complaints about noise happening, to that.
Yeah.
People have used that, so there's lots of ways that people can complain or voice their opinion.
And then also, I was
Yeah,
thinking,
it's probably very frustrating for the Zoom audience that you're not using the microphone.
oh, I'm sorry, I figured. I was also wondering, I guess I kind of.
You have to hold it close.
I lost my train of thought. That's all right. I'll get it back. Yes.
We have a couple people in the Zoom, like, too, including, Paul, you commented before, but go ahead again. Oh. Macaroni. You have to be unmuted. There you go. Now it's ready again. There you go.
I made a statement a little earlier, which was pretty short. It was less than 3 minutes. I'd like to take only maybe about 2 more minutes of your time now after listening to this discussion tonight. It was mentioned that perhaps the reason why you're not seeing more folks expressing a favorable view of this proposed law is because they feel intimidated to perhaps show up to the meetings. I can understand that might be true, and I can sympathize with those folks. However, this is a public forum, and this is an issue that has to be decided publicly. I'm concerned, several times tonight, a couple of the members of the board have mentioned hearing from these people who want help. Several times previous on Facebook forum, other individuals have asked, let's hear from these people. What are specific instances that these people are concerned about or currently suffering from? I would like to know if you can make public the statements that you have been receiving from these people for all of us to see. If they don't want to show up in person, I'm fine with that. But I think that in the interest of fairness, if these folks have a legitimate concern, that they should at least be willing to put something in writing and sign their name to it. Because otherwise, hearing you just say, you're hearing from people, it does not sit well with the rest of us out here, because we can't know who these people are and if their concerns are legitimate. I would certainly be willing and interested to hear some specifics, but there seems to be a serious lack of specifics and a serious lack of transparency in that regard about the people who have some type of ongoing problem. Other than that, we keep referring to only the same two instances over and over and over again.
I don't know if maybe you weren't listening, but earlier in the meeting, Leslie committed to putting a list together and sharing that.
I think I did hear something about that, but I've got to tell you, the audio coming from this meeting is horrendous. It's very poor, and we're not able to discern every word. I did hear, I think, the little bit that you are alluding to now, but it was so unclear that I couldn't garner the details of that. But I really believe that, if these folks have a problem, they have to be willing to at least make a written statement and say what it is. Otherwise, it just doesn't look transparent, especially since that the results of previous surveys have shown the majority of people are not in favor of this ordinance. And it's quite clear tonight that the overwhelming majority of people who have showed up in person are against this ordinance. So I think that would be important for people to believe in the honesty and transparency of what's going on there. And I have only one more comment, that something I observed about a half an hour ago. I'm not sure who everyone's name is on the board. This statement is directly referring to the gentleman on the left with the plaid or the checkered shirt. Sir, what's your name?
Steve,
Hello?
yeah, that's Steve right there. Steve.
Okay, I'm sorry. For some reason, somebody else came up on the screen. Who are you?
Steve.
Steve. Okay. So about a half an hour ago, you were engaged in a conversation with someone there speaking on the floor. And there was some back and forth concerning what was going to be in the proposed law and some things that might be. Hello?
I'm not sure that was I'm not sure what that was about. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now again?
Yeah.
Okay, so you were having a discussion with a gentleman on the floor about what was going to be possibly allowed into a law and what might be an exemption or an exception. And towards the end of that conversation, you were speaking with him and trying to clarify your position. And you actually made the statement that our goal is to craft a law that takes these exceptions and exemptions into consideration. And that really struck me hard, that at this point in the process, you would actually make a statement that our goal is to craft a law with exceptions and exemptions. It seems to me that at this point in the process, if you were truly being objective and haven't already formed an opinion as to whether or not we need a law, it would have been more appropriate to make a statement that said, we are considering whether or not to make a law and what specific exemptions and exceptions might be in that. I was really sorry to hear that, because it just kind of underscores some of the suspicions that we have that the board has already a preconceived idea that this must happen. So I'd like to see, as I said, I'd like to see a little bit more transparency on what people are saying about this in favor of it. And I really, really hope that you will keep an open mind about this, and listen to the people and not go into this with some personal agenda. Thank you.
Ed?
Yep, thanks. Just a couple of quick notes that I've jotted down, listening to the conversation. First one, you keep referring to Ted having said something. Since I know it wasn't me, was it Ted Merritt, Ted Melchin, Ted Jones? Which Ted is that?
My name is Ted Lascano. I live on Gunderman, Pennsylvania. I started knowing you through the fire department.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Best answer I've heard all day. Second one, maybe I missed it in the last 2.5 hours, but I just wanted to thank Warren, and I think we should all be thanking Warren for the effort he put into this. What he came up with may not be the final version of a law. It may never even be passed, but there's a lot of work that was represented in that. Yes, someone did mention the idea that this could have been put with a open working group. And I think that would have been a good idea. You could have gotten a lot of this stuff out aired out earlier in the process. I don't think you should head from here to a public hearing. I think you might want to have revisions and then have a meeting like this again. And if there is a working group, I certainly hope that you'll include it in the discussions when it does come time to do that. That was something that was lacking from the process. You're going to discuss this later in the meeting. There was a working group that had to do with conservation, easement, and tax exemptions, and its input was the group was not really allowed to present much input during official meetings after it finished its work. A word to two people who've spoken. Mauricio, now I know where the noise is coming from, and you know something, it's louder than the rustling, your workshop, louder than the rustling leaves, louder than the birds and the bees, but it's not loud. I didn't know it was you. I thought it was from much further away. And Mark Gugino, I think it's rather ironic that, well, Mark and I are neighbors like Mauricio, and it's ironic that people from completely different ends of the political spectrum both have a liking for objective standards. They don't want ambiguity in what will be prosecuted and what won't. And along that line, I did mention earlier that I could think of 4 instances when I really had a serious noise complaint. And relevant to your talk about short-term rentals, I will point out that 2 of the 4 had to do with what I would call short-term rentals. And with that, thank you. It's been a good discussion you've had today. A little bit long, but good.
A little bit longer. I think it's a fair characterization. Okay.
And please fix your mics.
So, yeah, I would highly encourage you to use the mics, the corded mics, the wired mics, because the wireless ones just aren't working.
Really?
Dennis, are you talking about us or the audience?
The board.
The board.
Okay, so if the board has to get, you can hear me, right?
It's
You're
muffled.
not too bad, but the people in the audience are clearer than you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ted, I'll pass your comments on to Mauricio. He had to leave the meeting, take care of animals. Yeah.
Thank you.
3 or 4 thoughts that came through. One is I really would encourage the board to form a working group. I will volunteer to be on that working group. I think there's a bunch of other people here would be able to be on that, and we could maybe do another iteration, of your work. And I also appreciate boiling down 400 or 500 different ordinances must have been a real pain in the butt. So I do not, would not enjoy doing that. One of the things that I have heard people complain about is excessive gunfire around the town. And I'm a sports shooter. That's a thing of interest to me. When I hear guns go off, my ears perk up and go, oh, who's doing what? What's going on? And
one of the things that I think is happening is that there's 2 or 3 sources that are being conflated into the town problem of that. One is there's a range on Burns Road just north of the edge of town, which is the police range, and it's used by 4 different agencies. That you might be able to confirm that. And they take, 20, 30, 40 people down there at a time, and they shoot. And I've seen things on the Danby Facebook, somebody's out there shooting all day long, can't you give it a break? That's not any of your neighbors. That is an agency qualifying their people once, twice a year. And that's not anything that we have control of. When the wind blows one way, you'll hear in one part of Danby. When it blows another way, you'll hear in another part of Danby. That's not any of your neighbors out there, plinking in their backyards. None of us can afford that much ammunition. If you could find it, which is another problem. There's also a track range down in Newfield, down at the bottom of the hill, which when the wind's out of the southwest, I hear it up in my property, Ted, you probably hear it at yours. And you can hear them down there, usually in the early evenings or something like that, popping away, shooting clays. That's nothing we have any control of. We're not doing that to annoy anybody. So, and the third thing is that some folks around are doing construction. They're fixing their roofs, they're doing stuff like that. If they're using the nail drivers, that's essentially a 25 caliber blank nail driving pistol. It sounds like you're shooting a pistol. That's again not one of your neighbors shooting guns to annoy you. So, but that's being rolled in with some of these complaints. I don't hear very much shooting around town. I think I've heard maybe twice in the last 30, 40 days. Just it doesn't happen, nearly as much as it used to, probably because it's hard to find ammunition and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ted again. I was a fire instructor for 20 years and I'm also a gun collector, and I can tell you with the cost of ammunition, gunfire typically does not last very long. You can take one magazine and you spend $20. So normally what you hear when it comes to gunfire is somebody who sights in a weapon and they're done usually within 15 minutes because of the expense. And I know personally from law enforcement, people exaggerate claims. I've had noise complaints. I go there, I park the car, I sit there for 30 minutes. I go up, I speak to the complainant, and they tell me all kinds of horrible stories. And I said, when did it end? Oh, just 2 seconds ago when you pulled up. And I sat there for 30 minutes and there was almost nothing. So what people tell you, you have to take with a grain of salt.
I think it's worth mentioning, Janice, our town clerk, posted that she has compiled all the noise complaints in 2022. And those will be a link to the website. And she's working on 2023, and when she gets those, she'll add those to the list as well. So that's,
There are a few people on that list that I know that some people are talking about wanting transfer, but there are a couple people on that list because of neighbor situations that would like their names not. The list I was putting together was specifics about situation and time of day, things.
It would not be appropriate.
It's not, without the permission, that's all.
That's one of the things I meant to comment on, is that if we had a working group, that would be a smaller, more congenial, group where people might be more willing to come forward with their specifics and talk to a group without having to walk into something that's a little more free flowing and, we need a little more.
There are a couple of situations where it's a
Yep.
very.
Yep, understand that possibility. I think it's feedback with this microphone. I'm sitting close to the speaker.
Well, Steve's mic also just shut off when that happened, so that could also be it.
Is anybody on the list from up there? What's that? Is there anybody on the list from you guys? Okay. I've had some complaints with the neighbor about barking dogs, but the police do come to barking dogs. And they'll take it and they'll call the SPCA. And I mean, it's gotta be off the wall, it can't be, you know, the dog's barking because I go get my mail. It's like, all day. So, I mean.
I've been playing it about a year ago.
I think that what you're asking is kind of, I know that there have been times that I've been irritated, but I've never written a explaining letter to say somebody's got to do something about this. But there have been times when I've complained or a neighbor has complained to me about some noise that they misunderstood or heard in the neighborhood, and that happens all the time. So if that's the question you're asking, that's what we're talking about that people do. They complain to each other, then they get over it. And the more we hear things, the more we understand our neighbors, the more we get over it. But that's not the thing that some people are referring to as egregious. So, I mean, I can give you one really quick, because this is going on and on, example of something that happened that might be relevant. And that is that there were fireworks last summer late at night. And people, I got telephone calls, people, who's that? What's going on? Turns out that it was a wedding at La Tourelle, and Scott Wiggins went and got a permit, did everything he was supposed to do. He went to all of the neighbors and told them all about it everywhere around. And then people complain, they yell at me about it. Who's that making that noise and things like that? I'm going to say something out of turn. I'm going to say sometimes the answer is get over it. Just get over it. But that goes for all of us. That goes for people like you who are complaining about us too. We all need to get over ourselves sometimes. And I'm hoping for that because I agree, Kevin's saying a smaller group and people who might be able to talk without saying mean things to each other. You know, it's not easy.
We just go on a lot of fast.
What?
We don't want to go on fast. That's why everybody's angry.
Yeah.
You understand?
I didn't hear the first part. Oh.
They just don't want to know the law. That's
I understand that, and the thing is that part of what happened is the terminology that was spreading around saying about a law was inaccurate. And that happens, it's not just this, there's other things that come from, that we hear that somebody says in a group that makes it sometimes the Danby Southwest Facebook page. And it sounds really terrible, but it's not been explored by the person who hears it there. So it behooves us all to say, is that really what happened? Is that really what you're going to do?
I have a suggestion for you to consider.
Okay.
I'm a retired high school teacher. And when you have kids who can't get along in school, which happens more and more, they have peer mediation. I wonder if the town board would consider having a group of whatever number of people, maybe it'd be 7 people, who would be trained in these sorts of things to try to work out these more grievous things that people like you're talking about, Leslie, who are really at angst with each other to try to work it out and have a fair and amicable solution and use some peer mediation as adults. We're just kids in bigger bodies and older bodies.
I'm not saying it's a great idea. It's not a great idea. The problem is mediation is not binding. Mediation takes very specific training.
Yeah.
And the volunteers necessary to dedicate themselves to that are barely present in filling committees that are present. It's played out like this in a number of places. It kind of sounds like a good idea, but it wanted to be just unworkable to get people to commit to doing it. It's also very expensive to get mediation training. And without training, it would be really a wild card. But it's like pouring gasoline on the floor. It's a tough job.
And that was something that I originally had sort of been hoping for. But I thought or Brett started investigating all these options, he'd come up with some really nifty, you know,
Yeah.
situation where it's like, you know, two people could go out and talk to people who were being unreasonable. The neighbors would talk to each other, but it doesn't sound like those situations work in such a huge area. So if it's like a school or more consolidated group, it's easier to get something like that. That doesn't mean that isn't something we can still do. There may be situations that can be fine. I don't know.
I mean, you shouldn't be surprised that all of these things that we talked about, taken into consideration, but some of them didn't make the cut, so to speak, you know, for a variety of reasons.
Institutional knowledge has pretty much said, if without a law, there's nothing to keep one party or the other from just holding up their middle finger. You can't compel them to be in negotiation or mediation, and so without that, it makes it impossible to make that work, so.
It's what I,
Yeah.
I'll just comment on that. There are mediators out there that call law enforcement, and I'll be the first to admit, police are fundamentally lazy people. An officer would much rather go up, talk to both parties, and leave, and not have to do any more paperwork than just say parties we're spoken to, we'll return upon another complaint. And I know my own experience, you go to the noise maker, you start out, look, maybe you're not understanding their point of view, blah, 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 blah. I really don't want to have to come back, so you tell me how we can work this out. What would work for you? Talk to the complainant, you get to talk the same thing. Where can we meet them halfway? Because the person making the noise, this is their situation. So they have these needs, you have their needs. What would you do halfway? And the person making the noise, what would you do halfway? And the majority of the time, an officer can come up with some kind of reasonable compromise between the two parties. They don't have to do paperwork, tie up the courts, and then they leave, and normally it's done. So the first step is getting law enforcement involved, and there is laws there. And I do have to disagree with you. You really need to meet in person. It makes a huge difference. You can get a supervisor on the phone. He's busy, he's got a boss yelling at him, he talks to you for a few minutes, he's got other things to do, so that, I think that's all I can do to buy and gets on the rest of this day. When you sit down, if you make an appointment, sit down in his office, you have his full attention, and you can work out stuff a lot better than that. I think it's really important to me in person.
You hash more things out that way too. Just like this meeting.
After 3 hours of this meeting, after listening to all that, it seems like this is a law enforcement issue, not a town issue. When you guys are not here, they're asking for you to use the microphone. After 3 hours of listening to all the comments, this to me is a law enforcement issue, not a town issue.
And again, along those lines, if you guys were to actually speak to higher tier of the law enforcement to work out these issues, it would be beneficial to the rest of us to hear the final statements of these individuals to yay or nay on this subject, or the subject to be brought up again.
Absolutely. One thing that I've been committed to is from the get-go, keeping people informed of what process has been as we go along. And when we get done tonight, I'm going to go for the now news, the deadline is imminent, how it went tonight. People know how that went, and what next steps are, what we're talking about. Maybe we'll be talking about it more. We have yet to start our board meeting.
Excellent.
But I think that we can probably draw this to a close. I thought it was important that everybody has a chance to speak and have a back and forth, which is why this is not a public hearing. It's an opportunity for this course subject. And I think it was very good, productive. Thank you all. With that, I would like to draw this to a close.
I would like to say one thing first. An official thank you for one, for looking at all of those laws in areas comparable to ours, not the same city. We're still in that information, so we'll know what the standard laws are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whatever you can say. So I mean,
the possibility of something, why don't we just, reconvene tomorrow night? Have a time working then, instead of going to another. Well, why don't we convene the meeting and adjourn tomorrow?
That's not hear you. It's a nice.
Well, if you want to adjourn the meeting, we'll continue tomorrow.
I know, but they still don't know what we're talking about.
When I'm talking about the possibility of starting the meeting, but not going very much, because we've already spent 3 hours, before we get to the meeting. And then just picking it up again tomorrow. So that we're not,
I'm not in favor of doing something. But I don't have a problem with saying,
I'm sorry, someone was at my window and I didn't hear what's happening right now.
and they're kind of too far from the light. We're having a discussion about whether to have the meeting now or later.
Okay,
Or starting now and continue it later. With Pat objecting to that and saying if she'd rather reschedule so we have appropriate public notice of when we're gonna actually have the meeting instead of now.
I am worried about the things that we need to kind of but I think we'll pass it.
I think we should do it out now.
Well, the doctors and the highways, there's one. Well, yeah.
Well, there's also the, if we're not going to do it tomorrow, there are a couple of things on it that are
could somebody put the mic, the corded mic in front of you? Please, please, please. Yeah, in front of everybody. Just use the corded mics.
Is that any better?
A little better. That's a little better.
It doesn't sound to me a whole lot different than what I was getting out of the other one.
Keep going.
Right. Anyway, what I'm hearing is the board would like to do the most pressing business now and then reschedule to deal with the rest of this at a different time. Is that the sense of the thought?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, right. According to our rules, here, we could convene, we got 2 hours from now. You just don't really want to be here for 2 hours. Okay, so let's call the meeting to order. And we do have.
That's correct, yeah. There's a Laura can go home.
Right, and we will be skipping for the for, but, then again, nothing that we will be doing tonight will be in the people who comment on any of this. So skipping ahead, the warrants. You know, we had, Dan Klein was here earlier. Brand is different. Yes, we have the warrants, yes, including this one last time.
Yes.
If you get close enough to your mic,
The general the total is different than what was on the. Yeah, I mean, the first, I wasn't saying that it's correct. What was the correction?
It was listed on the abstract was 18985, and that considered a 18895.
What? I don't know.
that's down to the voucher.
Yeah,
Which chapter?
voucher A126.
A 126 to fellow?
Yeah,
It was supposed to be what?
it should be 18895,
That is what appears in the abstract.
and that has been changed, I saw it.
I got it, 18895.
Okay,
So the total,
no, I haven't changed.
the
But
total,
number on the agenda, it's different than
Right.
the total.
Right.
Yes.
right,
And I think the total on this, Janet, which is 18,818.70, is the correct total. And the total on the current agenda
was wrong. Okay.
is wrong by like a dollar.
About something.
Yeah.
Yes, my fingers were on the wrong buttons. Okay, I fixed it.
Yeah,
So it is 18,
it's consistent with it.
81870.
Yes,
Okay,
8,187.
okay, so I'll move the general,
Second.
voucher 124 to 140 for $18,818.70.
Second.
Great.
Questions for Justin? No?
What's data flow?
They make copies.
Data flow makes copies?
Yeah, it's a copy, it's a printer,
Huh?
it's a printer, a printing company.
So,
No.
I mean, I just couldn't tell from the bill.
The bill doesn't say what it is, so there's no way to check. The bill just says invoice.
Yeah.
There is no bill associated with it. Janice said that there was no bill associated with it.
There's no what?
Bill associated with it.
No, there wasn't. I thought there was a bill.
Oh, yeah, actually there was, but it doesn't say what it is, yeah. Right. Yeah, I don't want to say that.
It's kind of unhelpful. The old days, go to the grocery store and get something.
Yeah, right. Okay, data flow, that's. Okay, now is somebody second that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Hey, Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yeah.
Iceberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yeah.
Gagnon,
We're not going back, we're not doing abstract 9.
Yeah, there is an abstract. Well, you guys didn't do the highway yet, right?
Yeah, there's still highway and water fund for one abstract
Okay,
date.
never mind. I'm gonna do the highway, abstract 8. Vouchers 75 to 82 for $32,043.19.
Second.
But there is a difference there. Janice, did you put that one that I sent for the additional 10,000?
Not get a chance to put that up.
Okay, guys, can we need to get approved a bill that we just got in today from JB Excavation. They finished the Bruce Hill called the Bruce Hill project. Okay, and they just gave us that bill.
Is it, Laura, be timely enough to do it tomorrow?
Well, we're going to read them.
Oh, you could do it tomorrow. That's okay. If you have a meeting tomorrow, we are gonna meet tomorrow then?
We haven't decided yet.
I can't hear you, Joel, so I don't know.
We
what you're
haven't
saying.
decided whether to do tomorrow, because we haven't given notice to the public.
Okay, if you are gonna meet tomorrow, we can do it tomorrow. That way you can see the bill.
And if it's next week, Monday or Tuesday, is that good enough too?
We usually, as soon as he finishes that.
Well, we don't have anything to read though.
So it's for the ground, what is it?
It's a simple bill. It's his bill for, you guys have approved it on the agreement to spend highway funds. It was a job that he did on Bruce Hill. It's a culvert project. Yes, on Bruce Hill, a culvert project. He just finished it either today or yesterday, and we just got the bill today. It's for $10,000. It was the agreed upon amount. If you guys would just want to approve it, you could approve it, and we could email you out tomorrow the actual invoice so that you can see, yes, this is exactly what you just approved, and it would be the next voucher number.
If we just got the bill today, why do we have to pay it today?
Yeah.
Well, it's just something that we like to do for this particular vendor. He's always there, Johnny on the spot to help us, and you'll see that in one of the resolutions today. He's Johnny on the spot. We would like to be able to get him paid. I guess we could wait a week or two, but it's just something that we were hoping to get in there tonight. There it is. Is that it? Is that it right there, Janice? JBX. There it is right there. There it is right there. There's the Bruce Hill Road, Ithaca, New York. Bruce Hill Road, 96-inch culvert replacement, stone head walls, and grade control structures, $10,000. So there it is right there.
That would be 80, voucher 83 for JB.
JB Excavation, and the total would be for the highway fund, $42,043.19. Now 42,000 instead of 32.
Okay.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I will send that. I move abstract 8 highway voucher 75 to 83 for $42,043.19.
Second.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Again?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yep.
Kenyon.
Thank you.
And I move the water district vouchers 8 to 10 for $582.
Second.
Ready?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yeah. That's an additional activity.
Yes. Why are they doing this? Why wasn't it all
Well,
And there was abstract 9. I'm not sure, Janice, if you had that put up.
I can pull that one up.
We got that.
It was vouchers 117 and 118 from last week, from the last time. That's what you said, it's 117, 118, so they're from last.
Yeah. It's actually just the highway fund credit card expense. Do you need me to pull it up?
We're leaving it, it's an abstract 9 instead of just adding it to abstract 8.
It's on abstract 7, because it's the same number.
It's like that special abstract 9, we put the abstract 9 up for the highway. And then when Janice and I'm searching down some other receipts too, we kind of felt that you guys needed more than just maybe one evening or one day to get that one approved, because there's quite a few of them. So we want to get that one done so you have a good week to look it over and have more time to sort through. To really be able to sort through that one. So, but at least we got it started. And then when Janice puts that one up, that'll be the still abstract 9, the general fund portion. This, at least to get a start, we've got whatever's left over from highway that goes from January to the end of April on the credit cards. There it is, right there, Janice. Thank you. Oh, now this one, we got voucher 83. So we'll change this voucher number to 84 because we just added 83. So we'll change this voucher number to 84. And this is what it'll be.
So we're revising that highway.
It's a separate budget.
It's a separate abstract.
Separate abstract, what's the abstract number?
94. Oh, abstract 9, it's a new one.
For simply the highway credit card.
Right.
So we're doing this tonight, so
Yes.
I don't know if that goes to our actual minds.
Yeah.
You know, all 4 receipts are attached to the voucher.
Okay, so I move highway voucher 84 for $715.92. From everybody.
Second.
Okay. Did you already do it? All right, second. Whatever.
I heard Woodworth. Was Woodworth second?
Pat, leave it to it, So this is abstract.
The next number, obviously.
Should be 10.
Yeah.
So are we voting?
Get rid of it.
Yep.
That's me. Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yeah.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Kenny.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Now, there's there are a couple of things that are related to.
Did you guys get the water abstract?
Yes.
You guys did that one? Okay, sorry, my mind's going another direction.
You're gonna go home more.
Oh, I am at home, so I knew that I had a feeling this was going to be a long board meeting, so I went home and tuned in here.
We have essentially an emergency situation here, deterioration of the head wall on the Peters Road culvert. And an opportunity to deal with it, because JB's in the neighborhood and they made us an offer to fix it. So there's a couple of observations that I needed to deal with it. One is that provide for funding using, because this is part of the capital improvement. And it has to be part of the agreement to spend funds, which we haven't entered into in the RDF in 2023. So this will be the first part of our agreement with the highway superintendent for spending capital improvement funds. And there's a resolution for that.
There's some extreme winter recovery funding.
Yeah, there's one for the agreement to spend funds, and then there's the other one. So maybe Joel, maybe the first one we should do is to declare the failing culvert head walls on Peter Road an emergency situation.
Oh, okay.
we could do that one first.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one's first because we mentioned payment in both of them.
Just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Do we have a hard copy of that, agreement? We can also sign it, but we're supposed to.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, it's on the side.
Okay, good. We can all sign one of them.
Yeah, you guys are all there. You can all go ahead and sign that one. Just pass it around the table if you've got a copy of it there.
You're gonna, I clear the meetings if you could.
Right. So you want to move that resolution?
That's an emergency.
Is that the one?
No.
That's the
This
resolution.
is the same thing.
Yeah.
We don't have a written for the other one, so I move that we declare the, Peter Road culvert problem of emergency.
And, if we declare an emergency and we sign a contract to JP to make it work.
Well, that's two separate things here.
Well, only because it one carries over on the next line, it's all one resolution.
Now, this is the resolution to declare a failing culvert head walls on Peter Road an emergency situation. And warden.
Yeah, one with contract to replace it, right? Now, that's, if I think about the probably a violation of the policy, we get with one resolution doing two things.
One is pursuant to provisions in section 284 of the highway law. One of them,
When we're signing the contract to to fix the problem. That's two things, right? Look at separated out.
I resolve that we declare the failing culvert head walls on Peter Road an emergency situation.
That's the resolution now. Declaring emergency. Ready for that one? Yes,
Me?
did you capture that?
Who, I thought Connors did it first and then Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the resolution is to declare the emergency. only.
Okay, got it. Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth. Nope, sorry, Weisberg. Take it back. Woodworth
Yes.
and Gagnon. Can you say yes?
Yes.
The worst, the worst statistics ever.
Motion for a resolution to award the contract to JB Excavation to replace those steel sidewalls.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? We're lucky he's in.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is resolution 112 and Joel, you moved it. And Connors seconded. Did I get that?
That's correct.
Okay, and we're ready? Okay, Connors, Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes. I didn't realize Steve was here, Keith was here, me to steal your thunder, Keith, you could have, give us a little bit of the backdrop on that.
Not necessary.
Ouch.
You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Let's see.
I got you.
So the next one is the agreement to spend funds.
there you go, Keith.
There we go. Can you hear me? All right. So listen, I've been looking at this for quite a while. This Peters Road has a very, very long drop off at the bottom of a curve. It's on the bottom of a hill. And there's a culvert pipe in there. We're a little unsure of the culvert yet, but the head walls are starting to fall over. Due to the winter that we've had a lot of freezing, thawing, which makes things move in the ground a lot more than what they normally do. This being said, the walls are
began to heave even more. They're getting ready to fall over, so to speak. And then we're talking about a 12, 13-foot drop off, if you will. It's pretty long ways down. And when I'm saying an emergency, it's in a situation where we'll have to shut the road down. With trucks coming down that hill, you need every bit of shoulder that you have. There's actually no guardrails there now as it is. You really need every inch of that road that you have there as a safety issue. That's the bad news. The good news is we're getting on top of all these culverts and stuff, and we're making a lot of progress on these. And the other good news is that we have a wall builder here now that's gave us a great quote on to put these walls up. These are big walls, and I was really floored when he said that he would do the job for $9,500. That was a pretty a blessing in disguise, I think. But so that's probably all I can add to that. But did you have any other questions, Joel, or?
No, I was eating this. So I move that we, the board approve the $9,500. That's $9,500 we spent.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed, yeah. As the on the culvert replacement, not the culvert, but the head wall replacement of the Peters Road culvert. As part of the agreement to spend funds for 2023.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna need to back up. I thought we already did, so we did the authorize an emergency award of contract, that was resolution 111. And then we awarded, and then we resolved 112, authorize the highway department to replace the Peter Road culvert head walls as part of the agreement to spend funds. I'm very confused right now.
The first resolution was to declare an emergency.
The second one looks like it's all together, including the up to 9,500. What's shown here is.
But I think you just approved both of them, didn't you?
And we divided it into pieces.
Yeah, so the first one was to declare emergency situation. The second one was to award the contract to JB excavation. And the third one was to spend funds not to exceed $9,500.
Okay, so resolution 111 was actually to declare an emergency.
Right.
And then 112 was to authorize the emergency award?
Award the contract.
Award the contract
Okay.
to JD to replace the head wall.
Okay, and then now we're at 113, which is to authorize the highway department to replace the Peter Road culvert head walls, blah, blah, blah.
113 was the authorization to spend highway funds not to exceed $9,500.
Okay.
This is the first installment of the agreement to spend highway funds that we have, the town board has with the highway superintendent each year. So we're just authorizing installment one, so to speak, $9,500 for the purpose of replacing the head walls.
And that's the document that you have me hyperlink, correct?
It's the document we have what? Hyperlink.
You had me link it to the agenda.
Oh, actually, that wouldn't. Oh, we divided the one resolution into two parts. Because it had both the declaration of emergency.
Oh my gosh.
It had the declaration of emergency and the award of contract in one resolution. And according to our rules, there should be a separate resolution for each action. So we divided it into two parts.
Yeah, so I
He
have.
has verbiage, the agreement to spend town highway funds has verbiage pursuant to the provisions of section 284 of the highway law. So we've got to approve that one separately. Okay, just for that type of documentation that's required. And then we have to approve the resolution declaring the emergency, and then we just added on that to, you awarded it to JB Excavation. So you really have to approve each one of these separately.
Okay. So,
What we're doing is what we just put out in the-
I really can't hear a thing you're saying, Joel.
What? So what we're doing now is approving the agreement to spend funds as specified.
okay, which is what I just put up on the screen. Yes, so this is resolution 113.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay. I'm so sorry. And who moved and who seconded?
What?
Was this another moved by Joel and seconded by Leslie?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, I mean, I can try to go back to the audio. I'm not sure the audio is gonna help me. But it looks like there were, okay. So I just want to make sure we're clear. So let me also bring this over here. This is what I have, right? So you had this authorize an emergency award of contract. But first you had to declare the emergency, excuse my typo. So that became resolution 111, which is actually this. Okay, so this was the first one. The second one was this.
Wait a minute, the first one was the declaration of emergency.
Correct. Yes, that's why I just did this right here. So emergency. Great. The second one that we did the roll call vote was Joel, and then Leslie seconded for authorizing the award of the contract. Right? This is resolution 112. Okay, and now we're going back to this one, which is this this right here, this authorization to spend highway funds, or the agreement to spend highway funds. Can you see both of my windows here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Long pause. Okay, and which is, that's what this hyperlink is right here. So I'm going to call that resolution 113. I'm going to copy this. Paste it. I'll fix that, don't worry. This is going to be 113. This was 112. Okie dokie. So now we're ready for the vote.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay.
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the minimum. Business.
Actually, there's a couple more minimums. One is to approve the tax across America sound, because it needs to be in a newsletter. I don't move that we approve the authorized tax across America ceremony at front of the town hall on May 29th.
Yeah, I thought we had done this last week. Yeah, I thought we did this too.
If you don't, then it's good.
I think we skipped it last. What happened last time? We haven't did anything here. We accidentally skipped it. Oh, at the very end of the agenda. And we got about it.
Yeah.
Well, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to say it more broadly. You can't make one match, you have to say on Monday, which Memorial Day is celebrated. And then
What do you want tax across America has on their website, which is the Monday.
this is the Monday.
Then the other is that Danby is not the second from us.
Yeah. So if you want to generic, you don't want authorization to have an annual Path Across America ceremony, at the town hall, on make an official celebration day for Memorial Day.
Just on the water. I'll second that.
But to authorize it. Yeah. So move in second.
Ready?
Guess so.
Okay, Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
Gagnon. Did Gagnon respond? Wait, I did not hear Gagnon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know,
I was distracted, so.
the other one was the, response deadline for the short-term rental. So we can put that in the newsletter as well.
Good point.
And I don't think there's any reason for doing it soon.
I think this is it.
I would say maybe.
You have a plan?
Right,
2 days,
yeah, that's, true.
2 days.
Yeah, but this is only April 19th.
Okay, give them one.
We're giving money.
Yeah, so it's gonna show up in the newsletter. So we get it beginning.
Don't forget it at the end of this month. Which is May 1st.
I mean, it's gonna take time to tabulate all those results.
Well, 2 weeks, if they'll give them 2 weeks, 2 weeks more. To get it to us, and then we want to tabulate. I thought May 10th would give us time to get an idea what the results were in time for the second meeting in May. Otherwise, we're not going to spend it in June before we.
Right, I like it.
Right, huh? Okay. And what's, do we have, if they send it in the mail or knock it on? What do we, or do we like, put it in a box or? Do we have a box you can start with the put them?
The survey said we did, we better have one.
Janice, do we have a box?
Someplace
I thought you could pick up the people who trying to hard copy.
This is
Put it in an envelope.
we're talking about the short-term rental survey. Are you asking if we have a box to put those surveys in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people that have been dropping them off personally with me, I have them in an envelope. There's the lockbox out front. If people wanted to drop them in there, they could do that.
And you gather them up, put them in the envelope, right?
Yep.
Oh, the envelope won't be big enough, but.
Think it's big enough?
People that accumulate in some place. I'm not, or continue to put them in. So, okay.
Okay,
Somebody submits it online. What's?
that's a good question.
Right,
Well, David wrote the final version, so he can click a button and then go.
There is a survey form online, and it is individual form that everybody fills out. We put down some things that you tabulate, but there is an individual form, and it's a place where you can type additional information in, and it's still at the place for name and address. Just like the survey.
It avoids duplication.
Say what?
It avoids duplication. So we can't fill it out twice.
Well, it keeps each individual, but then it will also give you.
Because it can't by the law, or lose that information. It saves everything.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so we need to vote on
We can.
May 10th, or we just.
So do we need to?
Yes.
I'm going to send May 10th as a response to it.
Second that.
Second that, but we're.
But February, it's like, you think that maximum has to be done.
3.2, okay. Yes.
Are you all looking at me now?
What's that?
Is this my turn? Okay, Joel, you moved something. I have no idea what it is.
I moved that we set May 10th as a response deadline for the short-term rental survey.
Okay. And then I think Steve seconded. Is that correct? No, Leslie. I don't know. Leslie. Okay. It's all up in the air. Leslie seconded. As response deadline. Was that the only thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I got this. We're ready for a vote.
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, Connors. Hunter.
Yes.
Weisberg.
Yes.
Woodworth.
Yes.
Gagnon.
That page might go to abstain,
From this.
yeah, that page,
Okay.
yeah, I do.
So we have one abstention.
Oh, okay. Catherine is changing to abstain.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So we don't, we're going to tabulate those, but what? We don't, we're going to tabulate those. Okay.
You said.
I'll give it a try. Yeah, okay. Well, we haven't got that far, but we'll have to decide between now and May 10th. Yeah. How we do it. Okay. Definitely want to have you do it before you leave us. Yeah.
Since that's coming from David West's office, he should be here and be part of that.
Okay, so, I mean, that's the minimum. So we schedule us postpone the balance of the agenda to another time.
Yes.
What would be the good time to have that postponed to? I did do that, there's a bunch of stuff that we really have. Well, there's the executive session. Is there anything else of significance?
Have we received?
Well, yes, there's a lot of just big
It's all
roles,
significant.
and it's not worth waiting 2 weeks for. So basically, we'd be skipping a meeting. We're talking about skipping a meeting.
Skipping a meeting.
One meeting a month, so I think we need another meeting.
Okay, so the question then is what? Yeah.
And I think we should be able to give enough time to announce it to people, the public, so they know.
And how much is it about? Couple days.
So we can do it, Thursday, Monday, Friday, or Monday.
Is there a Friday or Friday?
Today is Wednesday, same for on Monday.
Friday, that is better, but I will be here over the majority. We'll bring my calendar with it. Are we thinking at 6 o'clock? I am. It's basically the same meeting, just we can get around to it. No, I understand.
We could do it earlier.
Yeah, it's possible to do it. Well, if we did it Friday. Or earlier, I mean, I'll be honest, my family is out of town now, that on Monday. So earlier, earlier in the day. Or.
Can I make a recommendation?
Sure.
Can we get the equipment fixed before we have another hybrid meeting? Because I heard the meeting last night was also really bad. That it was really difficult to hear people in the meeting room.
Yeah.
And I think this is happening 2 nights in a row. I think we need to fix the equipment before we have more hybrid meetings.
Well, I'm not sure we can fix that quickly. No. I spoke with Warren this afternoon, the advance of this meeting, and he mentioned that he had some equipment he was willing to donate to the town that would ameliorate the sound in this room. He said, I could, need to talk to you about it. I'm not confident to really interact with him, but he was, we both hope that probably Drew would be. To talk to Drew about what, how they could be connected here. But that's not going to happen, between now and Monday. So we'll just have to make do. We will have less of a problem when we don't have 30 people trying to participate in the conversation. That the Zoom audience is also trying to hear. I did the best I could to have people, speak to a mic.
No, I get you, but I don't think that that was the main problem. I think the main problem is that the microphones are really not working properly.
I think
Those
the
microphones,
wireless
whether it's the
microphone-
AV, I don't know. I'm not a sound tech.
Yeah.
But I do know that two consecutive meetings where the Zoom audience can't hear anything that the people with the microphones are saying is a little bit problematic.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I thought it was just me or my machine, or my computer or something, but
No,
obviously everybody.
may I put in 2 cents here? It's not the room. Either the equipment isn't working or it's being used poorly. You just need to, hey, I can come in there and fix this for you probably, or I'll shut up. You've got a $500 system, the wireless system that really doesn't do the job. Your fixed mics could do the job, but what I'm hearing is that you're so far away from the microphones. You have to eat the microphone. It'll come through clearly. Every now and then a word comes through completely clearly when you lean forward.
Yeah,
So we're gonna look, Steve, what time would be good if we did it early?
If we could meet at 5, I think that would be.
Is that early enough? We want to do 3 o'clock in the middle of the afternoon? No? Okay,
Okay, 5 is.
5.
I don't think we'll be more than about.
well, I mean, we don't have a whole lot of people trying to show up here at the meeting because, they can't get you out of work soon enough. It probably won't be a problem. I think there's certain greater than having it be as regular time, and I have to remember that it's 5 instead of 6.
But this is not the regular day anyway, so it's already off time. So off time and off day.
Shoot the 5 o'clock on Monday.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So, motion please?
We'll be adjourned until 5 o'clock on Monday.
Well, not adjourned, we're scheduling our meeting, or rescheduling our meeting. Well, we're scheduling an additional meeting, because we have to meet now. It's a short one. So we're scheduling an additional meeting to cover the balance of the agenda for Monday at 5 p.m.
Second.
Okay, I'm just gonna repeat that for the Zoom recording. Joel moved to postpone the rest of the agenda items to a meeting that will be held on Monday, April 24 at 5 p.m.
Okay.
And Woodworth seconded, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for a vote?
Yes.
Great. Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Weisberg,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
With that,
Okay. I heard adjourned at 9:52 p.m.
thank you to all of our Zoom audience for being so patient.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'm gonna shut the Zoom off now.
Night, everybody. Take care. Drive safe. Bye.